The mornings in Joseon started much earlier than in most other places. People even said that the prince of the palace was the reason why the mornings began so early. The palace guards warmly welcomed him because he had once again come there to exercise. Crown Prince Munjong kept lifting weights like a beast, and he was not only training by himself but was also making the people around him train together with him. It was then revealed that the prince was actually someone from Earth whose real name was Yungjik, and before all of this happened, he had lived as a simple and ordinary young man from South Korea. He had studied food and nutrition in college because he wanted to become an all-around fitness trainer. Yungjik first learned about bodybuilding while serving in the military, and since he was a member of a frontline unit where there were not many things to enjoy, going to the gym became his only source of happiness and entertainment. Even after returning to college, he never stopped exercising, and because he spent more time focusing on fitness than his actual major until graduation, he slowly became completely obsessed with it. Because of that strong passion and dedication, he eventually became a Class 1 professional sports trainer, and the only unusual thing in his daily life was drinking juice, something he normally avoided because he always cared deeply about maintaining his muscles. One night, Yungjik decides to watch some YouTube videos before going to sleep and relax after a long day, but while scrolling through different videos, his eyes suddenly stop on a strange and unusual title that catches his attention. Feeling curious, he clicks on it and starts watching. The video talks about the reason why the great King Sejong lived a short life, and Yungjik begins thinking that it probably happened because people during that period did not have proper exercise methods or knowledge about maintaining their health. As someone who is deeply interested in fitness and physical training, he starts imagining what life would have been like if there had been a professional health and sports instructor during the Joseon period. Yungjik strongly believes that if something like that had really existed, then the history of Joseon could have changed completely, and many events might have happened differently. While thinking deeply about all of this, he slowly becomes sleepy and eventually falls asleep on his couch without realizing it. However, when he opens his eyes again, instead of waking up in his own room, he suddenly finds himself in the Joseon dynasty. At first, he cannot understand what is happening and thinks that he may have drunk a little too much the previous night and is still dreaming, but after carefully looking around at his surroundings and noticing how different everything feels. To his surprise, he realizes that he is now inside the body of a skinny man. Feeling confused and frustrated by the strange situation, he quickly opens the door and asks someone about his name. The person explains that his birth name is bestowed as Yu, while he uses the refined identity of Suji as his courtesy name. Yungjik quickly realizes that the name that his father has given him here is Yaido. Yungjik then realizes that he is actually the fourth great king of Joseon and is mostly known by his posthumous title. After hearing this unexpected information, Yungjik becomes even more shocked when he finds out that his father is King Sejong the Great. After that, one of the palace men informs Yungjik that Grand Prince Jinyoung has arrived at the court. Later, Yungjik goes to meet the person who is known in history as the greatest and most respected figure in South Korea, the Great King. However, when he finally sees him in person, he becomes completely surprised because instead of appearing as a powerful and charismatic man like he had imagined, King turns out to be a chubby person who seems to enjoy eating all the time. Yungjik then uses the automatic translation ability that came with his new body and respectfully asks the king to give him some kind of mission or task. The king explains that because he highly values and admires his talents, he plans to give him a suitable responsibility. He then says that they are going to rewrite the comprehensive reflections to aid in governance, so Yungjik should go to the Hall of Worthies and rewrite it using large letters. After Yungjik arrives at the Hall of Worthies, the man working there begins speaking very positively about him and praises him in different ways. Hearing this surprises Yungjik because he suddenly realizes that he is having no difficulty understanding the language at all, and it feels as if the memories and knowledge of the original owner of the body are still remaining inside him. When Yungjik finally reads the book that he was supposed to look at, he quickly notices that the words are already written in large and clear letters, which makes him wonder why the king was still having trouble reading it properly. As he thinks about it more carefully, Yungjik suddenly realizes that the reason behind it could be that the king is suffering from diabetes. Because of his knowledge from modern times, he also remembers that the king would pass away 3 years later, and after that, the palace would fall into chaos until Danjong eventually rose to the throne. While Yungjik is still lost in his thoughts, the second crown prince suddenly appears who in this world is supposed to be his brother. He starts speaking about the books their father had ordered them to read and reminds him about the responsibilities and studies they need to focus on. After finishing what he had to say, he leaves and continues with his own work. Once he is gone, Yungjik naturally starts doing some simple stretching exercises out of habit, but his actions immediately catch the attention of the officials and servants around him and leave them feeling surprised and confused. Since this is an old time period, people do not know anything about stretching or basic exercise methods because they mostly rely on physicians whenever they face health problems or physical discomfort. The next day, Yungjik decides to teach everyone around him some simple stretching movements, and before long, news about strange exercises begins spreading throughout the entire palace. Later on, Yungjik leaves the palace and goes outside to look for tree oil, but the shopkeeper tells him that such a thing is not available there. Yungjik then remembers that Grand Prince Suyang would later suffer from severe dermatitis and eventually die because of it, so until he finds a way to return to modern times, he feels that he needs to prepare some kind of solution and take preventive actions. At that moment, his wife from this era suddenly appears and becomes confused as she wonders why he is spending his time walking around together with ordinary and low-class people. Even though Yungjik is completely freaking out inside, he still calmly explains to his wife that he was searching for an item that people used in the old Song dynasty to wash their bodies. However, after coming to this era, the thing Yungjik feels he needs the most is soap because he thinks he smells like a crooked potato after all the exercising and sweating. He knows that even people in modern times suffer from different skin problems if they exercise while wearing clothes that are not washed properly, so he becomes worried about continuing bodybuilding in this era without having proper soap to use. Yungjik had once made soap before at the old gym where he worked, but it was a poorly made one because the grandmother of the bodybuilding gym owner had said that she could not trust the soap sold in markets. Yungjik's wife then explains that people believe the human body becomes dirty when oil gets on it, so she never imagined that oil could actually be used as one of the ingredients for washing the body. Hearing her reaction makes Yungjik quietly wonder deep inside if this married couple really does not have a close relationship. Later that night, Yungjik starts mixing several ingredients together so he can make soap in an easier way, and as he watches the process, he feels that things are going better than expected. After spending some time working on it, he finally succeeds in making soap and even uses it while taking a bath. While using it, he thinks it still has some flaws and is not perfect yet, but he also realizes that its cleaning ability is surprisingly good. Yungjik then starts thinking about the next major problem, which is the king's health, because even King Taejong himself had failed to make him exercise regularly. Yungjik already knows that the king probably would not listen to him either if he did not even listen to his own father. Because of that, he decides that instead of forcing him, he will try to convince the great king through logic and proper reasoning. However, while thinking about his plan, Yungjik realizes that with the body he currently has, he still cannot properly teach people the way he wants to, so he decides that he first needs to become stronger himself before helping others. He sets a goal of reaching a total of 400 kilograms in the big 3 exercises, which include deadlifts, squats, and bench presses. He also starts thinking about writing a complete book focused only on bodybuilding and fitness and then spreading it throughout the kingdom so that people everywhere could read it, learn from it, and stay healthy most of the time. The following day, Yungjik continues his training routine by doing exercises like pull-ups, push-ups, dips, and many other workouts as he works hard to build up his strength little by little. He notices that some of his muscle groups are naturally decent, but his core strength and pulling strength are much better than average. Later that evening, several people finally deliver the dumbbells that Yungjik had specially ordered earlier. The people delivering them start thinking that Yungjik has completely lost his mind because he is willing to pay 80 bags of rice for what they see as nothing more than heavy cast iron blocks. Yungjik quickly starts exercising with the dumbbells as if they are treasures, and while watching him, one of the women asks his wife if she is really fine with him doing all of these strange things. Later, when the woman goes to take a shower, she also decides to try using the soap for the first time, and after seeing the results, she becomes surprised by what it does. Later, Yungjik takes a shower as well, and when he comes out, his wife approaches him and says she also used the soap and that it actually works really well. However, she points out a problem: the smell of sesame oil is very strong and sharp, and if she uses it every day, people might even mistake her for the wife of an oil seller. Hearing this, Yungjik starts thinking about possible improvements and considers using pig fat or beef tallow instead, but he quickly realizes both options are just as expensive and not easy to get in large amounts. His wife then suggests that the smell might improve if he mixes the soap with Euodia tree oil or camellia oil, and Yungjik actually finds this idea very good and agrees with it. After that, Yungjik goes to a poor village in the Gaichin area, where he recognizes one of the villagers as a hunter who took part in last year's autumn hunt as a chaser. Yungjik then tells him that he has decided to support his family by giving them half a dough of sesame oil, 2 mal of rice, and some other basic groceries to help them get by. Over the next 2 days, Yungjik makes a promise to provide food for 20 children and has their weight and height carefully recorded. He divides them into 2 groups, where half of the children are given a proper diet focused on protein, while the other half are given meals focused more on carbs and fat. After that, he plans to track their changes in body shape and exercise ability over time, so he can use the results as clear proof later. Soon after, Yungjik orders even more heavy dumbbells and metal rods to be made, and this time they are much heavier than before. The total weight goes over 300 pounds, which shocks the villagers who are responsible for crafting and delivering them because they cannot believe anyone would need something so heavy. On his way back, Yungjik uses his trained fitness eye and notices one of the men nearby who has an extremely strong and unusual body structure. Yungjik thinks that this man cannot become a government official because he is the son of a concubine, but at the same time he clearly sees that he has natural talent and potential for bodybuilding that is far above normal people. Because of this, Yungjik tells him that he wants to train him and take him in as his first disciple to develop his body properly. He also tells him that if he succeeds, there will not be many people in all of Joseon who can compare to his physical strength. The next day, Yungjik goes to meet his brother, who immediately notices that Yungjik's upper body has become much stronger and noticeably bigger than before. Yungjik then introduces him to soap and tells him to try using it. When his brother actually uses it, he is surprised at how effectively it removes dirt and cleans the skin. After seeing the results, the crown prince decides to write an official notice stating that everyone in the palace must wash their hands with soap both in the morning and in the evening. Soon, everyone in the palace becomes amazed by the magical effect of the soap. They cannot believe that when they wash with it, all the dirt and unwanted oil comes off so easily, almost like it disappears on its own. Many of them are even more shocked that Yungjik was the one who made it, because they had always thought of him as nothing more than a troublemaker. At the same time, Yungjik notices that his muscles are growing quickly as well, and this fast progress makes him start thinking that this body almost feels like a bodybuilding deity has descended into the world. He once again increases the weight of his bench press, which surprises the fellow man who is helping him train. Yungjik tells him that he cannot reduce the effort he puts into training his body, no matter how hard it gets. He also looks at the equipment and thinks that the weights remind him of the rusty barbells he used in the army gym, but they are still usable enough for training. However, he is also facing a problem because the people making the dumbbells are unable to continue producing the rest of the heavy barbells due to urgent matters. Because of this, Yungjik pushes his fellow trainee even harder and forces him to train almost like a maniac as well, not allowing any break in their intense routine. Yungjik's wife notices everything that is happening and starts to feel that this situation is very strange. She is impressed, but also confused, because Yungjik is pushing his body strength to such an extreme level so quickly. Just then, someone suddenly arrives and begins banging on the door loudly and aggressively. A group of men dressed in black enters Yungjik's residence and immediately tries to attack his wife. Before any of them can even get close to her, Yungjik steps in and pushes one of the men away with just a single hand. The man stumbles back in shock, completely unable to understand how someone from a normal household could have such overwhelming physical strength, especially someone who is connected to the office of the Inspector General. He stands there confused, wondering how he was pushed aside so easily without any effort. Then another man steps forward and speaks, saying that it has been a long time since they last met during the hunting competition the previous year. Yungjik looks at him carefully and immediately recognizes him, calling him out by name. He directly tells Sukchi that if he dares to lay his hands on his people, then he will not just stay silent and watch as it is something he will never allow to happen. The squad then turns to Yungjik and asks him what exactly he is planning to do with those dumbbells, making it pretty clear that they see them as nothing more than straight-up weapons. They even go as far as pulling out one of the hunters from last year's competition who used to roll with Yungjik, making it obvious that they are holding him captive. Yungjik stands there thinking to himself that these guys have absolutely no intention of backing off or letting things go until they finish their investigation and get what they came for. He also thinks to himself that he has not actually done anything wrong ever since he came into possession of Grand Prince Jinyoung's belongings. Just then, Youngjin's elder brother steps forward out of nowhere and says that he caught wind of some pretty negative rumors going around, so he decided to come and see things for himself in person. He then turns directly to Sukchan and tells him flat out that if Yungjik can actually prove that those steel rods are nothing more than exercise equipment, then he had better be ready to put his own neck on the line over it. Yungjik then tells one of his fellow men to bring his book about bodybuilding, and says that the reason why he made a regimen and trained his body was to put it to use for something really important. Yungjik gives his book to his elder brother and tells him to check it thoroughly, and the elder brother realizes that he concluded that nurturing a good body shape is an act of filial piety. The elder brother then wonders why he would go through such an inconvenience just to make one regimen. Yungj whispers that they should talk privately about it, as he also know about their father's deteriorating with each passing day. However, the elder brother thinks that it's just because of his age and asks Yungj to tell him what his illness is. Yungj says that he must have high blood sugar and it's likely due to him consuming an excess of food beyond what is necessary. He doesn't even indulge in physical activities, so there is no way to release the yang qi. Elder brother tells the other guys to step back as Yungj doesn't have any bad intentions, but they refuse. The general inspector then speaks up and points out that there are plenty of high-ranking officers standing right there watching, so if they back down and step away at this moment, it is going to leave a really bad impression on every single one of them. He even goes as far as saying that if they want him to take a step back, then they are going to have to kill him first, because that is the only way it is happening. Right at that moment, Yungj realizes that what started out as a straightforward situation has now grown into something much bigger, as it is no longer just a test of his own abilities but a direct test of the Grand Prince's capabilities and reputation as well. The elder brother then turns to Yungj and tells him that he needs to sit down and explain clearly why he needs that much iron and that many devices all in one place. Yungj lays it all out and explains that way too much yang qi has built up inside their father's body over time and is now showing itself through the signs of aging that everyone can see, and that if they can pull that excess qi out of his body through regular physical training and exercise, he is going to start getting better. The elder brother takes it all in and fully understands what Yungj is saying, and then turns around and explains to all the officials standing there that all of those metal devices are simply being used for body training and nothing more. After that, Yungj steps up and goes head-to-head against one of the strongest inspectors there in a straight-up weightlifting contest. During the bench press, the inspector barely struggles his way through even a single set, but Yungj then steps in and cranks out 9 full sets one after another without breaking much of a sweat, leaving absolutely everyone standing there completely stunned. Once they are done, the inspector can't believe that he who is invincible in the office of Inspector General lost in a contest of strength. Yungj then tells him that in the physical fitness training, the number of repetitions depends on the goal of the training, and he can even lift up to 175 gun at once. Hearing that, none of the inspectors believe that and tell Yungj to stop speaking nonsense. Before leaving, the inspectors tell him that they are going for today, but they will keep doing their job with all their effort. Yungj then thinks that he is out of the immediate danger, and now the elder brother is aware of King's illness. After that, the elder brother told him that he is going to help him with the making of the conducting oneself and preparing the body. Yungj then apologizes to his wife, saying he must have surprised her and he should have been careful and had discussed this with her earlier. The exhaustion gets to him and he ends up collapsing right onto his wife's shoulder, which causes pretty much everyone standing around to get flustered and look away with red faces. Meanwhile, the inspectors huddle together and talk about how they noticed one of the strangest and most unusual items sitting among Yungj's belongings, and they start wondering out loud whether he is trying to put together some kind of completely different type of machinery that nobody has seen before. The inspector walks away from the whole thing even more determined than before to keep a close eye on Yungj and every single move he makes going forward. 3 months down the road, Yungj's wife sits him down and tells him that she is pregnant, and he completely lights up and cannot contain his excitement when he hears the news. He then gets right to work teaching her a set of exercises so that she can stay strong and not get completely worn down as the pregnancy goes on. However, after the baby is born, the crown princess ends up passing away from childbed fever, and just like that it becomes painfully clear how heartbreakingly common it is in this era for mothers and newborns to lose their lives during childbirth. After his child comes into the world, Yungjik finds himself completely pulled in and absorbed by his new life in the Joseon era in a way he never expected. Not long after that, the king makes a major announcement that all available disinfectant is going to be used to treat every single newborn and mother going forward. But just as that announcement is made, the king suddenly collapses to the ground as his illness takes a sharp turn for the worse right then and there. That night, Yungjik's elder brother pulls him aside and lets him know that their father managed to pull through this time around, but that his illness has still continued to get worse underneath it all. Yungjik then asks him whether their father has ever actually opened up and talked about what his symptoms feel like, but the elder brother says he never really did and that all he ever said was that it is deeply frustrating that he cannot see things that are far away anymore. Yungjik then stands there thinking to himself that retinal degeneration and cataracts are both completely incurable in this era, and that if nothing is done about it then things are just going to play out exactly the way history says they will, with the great king losing his eyesight entirely due to complications just 1 year down the road. Yungjik then realizes that their mother's birthday is just around the corner, and right away he starts putting together a plan to use that day as the perfect opportunity to step in and try to change their father's way of thinking about all of this. It turns out that what Yungjik is planning to do is pull off all 3 of the big exercises and on top of that perform the whole thing with a combined total of 1000 gun. Hearing that, the elder brother is completely taken aback and thinks to himself that what Yungjik is talking about is flat out impossible, pointing to the fact that even the palace guards, who were specifically ordered to give it a try, could not even get close to lifting 600 gun across the big 3, let alone anything near 1000. Yungjik speaks up and says that right now he is only sitting at 900 gun, which means that pushing all the way up to 1000 gun is going to be a serious challenge even when he is giving everything he has, but he makes it clear that he is going to find a way to get there no matter what for his father's sake. Eventually, the elder brother tells him that they are going to bring up the whole topic of conducting oneself properly and getting the body in shape directly in front of their father, and that they are going to make sure he gets to experience Yungjik's method for himself firsthand. From here on out, Yungjik is now faced with something that sounds completely crazy on paper, which is the goal of adding 100 gun to each of the big 3 exercises within just 6 months. From that point on, Yungjik throws himself fully into his special training routine, which includes things like hiking and all kinds of other physically demanding activities, and when it comes to food he cuts out everything that is not good for his body and sticks strictly to eating clean and healthy. Time passes, and after grinding through all of that training day after day, Yungjik comes out the other side stronger than he has ever been in his entire life. Finally, the long-awaited day of the Queen's birthday arrives and everyone lines up to put on different performances in front of the Queen to celebrate the occasion. The elder brother leans over to Yungjik and tells him that when he mentioned to the Crown Princess that Yungjik had carried 300 gun, she flat out did not believe it and actually got angry about it on the spot. Next, Yungjin drops down to his knees right in front of the Queen and tells her with complete sincerity that he is offering his warmest and most heartfelt congratulations on her birthday. He also goes on to say that the very fact that he exists in this world at all is entirely because of the divine kindness and generosity of His Majesty the King and His Majesty the Queen. On top of that, he brings up the book on bodybuilding that he has been working on and tells her that he has prepared something special for her to go along with it. Yungjik then reaches up and takes off his clothes, revealing the massive and incredibly built physique underneath, which sends a wave of shock through absolutely everyone standing there watching. Yungjik then goes over and lies down on the bench press area before proceeding to lift those heavy plates up into the air. Seeing that with their own eyes, all of the nobles standing around get completely stunned and start wondering out loud where on earth a person could possibly draw that kind of strength from. Yungjik then calmly explains to everyone that one of the most important activities covered in his book is the exercise that he calls the bench press. The Queen then looks over at him curiously and asks about the weight he is working with, and Yungjik tells her straight up that it comes in at 280 kilograms. After that, Yungjik moves on and starts explaining the squat to everyone, describing it as an exercise that involves placing a large and heavy barbell across the shoulders and then using the power of the legs to lower the body all the way down into a sitting position before pushing back up to standing again, repeating that motion over and over. The Queen then gets scared and tells him to stop, but Yungjik grabs that heavy 340 gun to perform the squats. Yungjik then steps up and starts powering through the squats, and the sight of it catches absolutely everyone off guard and leaves them staring in disbelief. The king turns to the physician standing beside him and asks whether something like this is even physically possible for a human body to do. The physician honestly does not know what to make of it, but he does his best and says that what they are seeing appears to be connected to something along the lines of what is known as healthy discipline. Finally, Yungjik moves on to the last part and shows them the deadlift, which is where he is going to attempt to carry the heaviest weights of everything he has shown them so far. Yungjik's elder brother quickly steps forward with a concerned look on his face, saying that it really looks like his waist could get seriously injured doing something like that, so he is going to need to strap on a belt before he even attempts it. After getting the belt strapped on and secured, Yungjik turns to everyone watching and tells them plainly that the weight he is about to lift comes in at 400 gun. One of the inspectors standing off to the side leans over and whispers to the person next to him that the Grand Prince must have completely lost his mind, because there is simply no way that any ordinary person walking the earth could pull something like that off. Yungjik thinks to himself that if he had not lost the weight he did, he would have been able to handle something even heavier than 400 gun without much trouble, but even so this amount of weight feels overwhelmingly heavy for the body he is carrying right now. Then, to the absolute shock and disbelief of every single person watching, Yungjik digs deep and manages to lift that massive weight clean off the ground. When Yungjik finally finishes up with the dumbbell, his mother rushes straight over to him to check on his hands, which are bleeding pretty badly. She tells him that since he has been working with those iron weights every single day for the past 2 years, his hands have ended up in this condition because of it. The queen then completely breaks down and starts crying, saying that watching him push and train his body to this kind of extreme level makes her tears flow without stopping. At the same time, everyone else standing around simply cannot wrap their heads around the fact that Yungjik's muscles are so well developed and defined that they are showing through that prominently, pointing out that even people who have spent years mastering martial arts might never end up with a physique that looks anything close to that. The king then turns to Yungjik and asks him directly what the actual purpose is behind the healthy discipline that he just demonstrated here today in front of everyone. Yungjik tells him that the whole point is to establish himself as a person and to perfectly prepare and take care of the body that the two of them gave to him when he came into this world. The king then raises an eyebrow and asks him whether lifting and working with 1,000 gun is really the standard he has set for himself when it comes to preparing his body. Yungjik then explains that the reason he even started this whole discipline in the first place was to get rid of the extra fat that had been sitting and building up around his abdomen. He goes on to say that his strength only grew naturally on its own as a result of that process, and that within just 3 months his arms and legs were moving more freely and smoothly than ever before, and the constant tiredness and fatigue that used to drag him down completely disappeared. Eventually, the king says that they should discuss his book at the palace later. The king also says that his royal title does not seem that satisfactory, and since he invented the healthy discipline and reached its peak, he suggested taking Su from Swiangbu to name him. That night, the king reads the book and tells Yungjik's elder brother that it's truly extraordinary, and even though he lends him a helping hand. After that, he continues reading through the book and his eyes land specifically on the section that talks about excessive fat and what it does to the body. The following day, the elder brother comes to find Yungjik and lets him know that the king has made the decision to go ahead and give the whole conducting oneself and preparing the body a real try. Yungjik immediately gets excited and tells him that he is already completely ready to go with all the equipment lined up and waiting. The elder brother then tells him that since national affairs are overflowing and there is so much going on at once, it has been suggested that they hold off and wait for an auspicious day before taking things any further. However, Yungjik knows deep down that there is not a whole lot of time left before the king's illness takes a serious turn for the worse, so he grabs all the equipment himself and takes off running straight toward the king without waiting for anyone's approval. The people of the palace immediately try to stop him and push him out for pulling something like that in broad daylight in front of everyone. When the king finally shows up and sees what is going on, he looks at Yungjik and asks him directly whether he wrote a specific part in his book with his illness in mind. Yungjik then tells him openly that he believes his father's illness might actually be connected to blood sugar levels and that in order to understand it better he tried putting his own body in a similar condition so he could experience firsthand what it feels like. It turns out that the condition Yungjik deliberately put his own body through is something called sogul, which is a disease where an excess of yang qi builds up and starts breaking the body down from the inside. He goes on to explain that eating way too much grain syrup or taffy can bring on a temporary case of sogul, and that as a result of going through sogul in that way, he would constantly find himself feeling extremely thirsty and ending up drinking as much as a full bucket of water just to try and satisfy it. On top of all of that, his vision would frequently go dark on him because of the overwhelming fatigue he was dealing with, and there were times when he would just drop off and fall asleep right where he was standing. What makes all of this so significant is that every single one of those symptoms lines up exactly with what Yungjik's father has been going through himself. In reality though, Yungjik is not being completely truthful when he says that he actually put himself through sogul on purpose, because what he is really doing is pulling straight from the knowledge he carries with him from the modern world about a condition known as diabetes and presenting it as his own lived experience. The king then looks at him and asks how long it is realistically going to take to bring sogul under control and get it treated if he follows and masters the book the way Yungjik says he should. Yungjik says that it will only take 5 days, and the king says that if he doesn't see any results in 5 days he will charge him with the crime of deceiving the king. After that, Yungjik forces his father to try various exercises like horse riding and bench presses. Even at mealtime, he only gets a protein-filled healthy diet, so he gets furious and calls out the royal chief. He tells the servants to take all of it away immediately and bring him his usual food instead, but Yungjik shows up right at that moment and steps in to explain that he put that menu together specifically for him because every single thing on it is packed full of healthy nutrients that his body actually needs. He also points out that it is going to help keep his sugar levels under control, and that both grain syrup and honey have been completely removed from everything. That night, the king sits down and tries to write something with his brush, but he struggles to get through it because he is completely worn out and his body is simply not used to the kind of lifestyle that has been forced on him lately. He sits there wondering to himself just how long he is supposed to keep training like this, and when he calls over one of his fellow men and asks him to bring some snacks, Yungj suddenly appears at the door and shoots him the most furious look imaginable, which is enough to send a jolt of fear right through the king on the spot. Later that night while he is trying to sleep, the king lies there thinking that he cannot even focus on carrying out his political duties properly anymore because Yungj's exercise routine has completely taken over his life. The next day, Yunj goes to pay a visit to the second deputy commander, who is in the middle of rambling and talking all kinds of nonsense about the palace to the people around him. He is carrying on and acting as though some kind of ghost has come in and swapped souls with him entirely, but the second he looks up and spots Yunj standing right there, he immediately straightens up, puts on his nicest face, and stumbles over himself to apologize. It turns out, this commander is a true genius who went from a slave to being promoted very quickly to a position of a third-rank official. As a royal engineer who contributed significantly to the development of Joseon, even in modern times, he's often mentioned as an excellent scientist. Despite that, his image looks different than what Yunj imagined. Yunj tells him that he wants him to make something and there is a royal order by His Majesty the King. Hearing that, the commander gets another manic episode. Yunj tells him to calm down since he hasn't gotten to the main point. He asks the commander if he knows about the regimen of conducting oneself and preparing the body. Yunj further says that the king is learning to conduct himself and preparing the body, but the problem is days are getting colder and he can't go outside, so they must prepare for the upcoming winter too. Yunj requests him to create something that can make it feel like he's running in a field even when in the room. The commander looks at it and says that this is something he has never laid eyes on in his entire life, so he is going to need some time to properly wrap his head around it and figure out how it works. Yunj is genuinely caught off guard when he hears that even the best and most talented scientist of this era finds it incredibly difficult to recreate something as straightforward as a modern-day treadmill. When Yunj brings up the fact that the king is already going through so much pain and struggle just trying to keep up with the exercising plan as it is, the commander perks right up and says that an idea just came to him that could make building the treadmill a whole lot faster and more doable. He breaks it down by explaining that if they try to build it out of a wooden board like the one shown in the picture, it is just going to snap and fall apart, but if they go ahead and build it out of steel instead, the whole thing is going to end up being 10 times heavier than it needs to be. After thinking it all through, the commander looks up and confidently says that he is going to have it built and ready in just 10 days. Sure enough, 10 days pass and the commander comes through and successfully puts the STEPS device together just like he promised. It turns out that Yunj is actually the very first person to step on and try the machine out himself, just to make sure there are no problems or issues that the king might run into when it is his turn. Later that same day, the king steps on and starts running on the machine, and he is completely out of breath after just 15 minutes of running right from the very start. Time passes, and little by little things begin to change, until eventually the king is not only in genuinely good health but he is also looking more charismatic and handsome than he has in a very long time. Yunj's elder brother pulls him aside and lets him know that there is talk going around among the ministers that their father's sudden transformation is actually a sign that his health is getting worse rather than better. However, Yunj tells him not to stress over it and points out that according to the records kept at the royal clinic, even though their father has been sweating a lot more than usual, the actual amount of water he is drinking has gone down, which is a good sign. Time keeps moving forward and before long winter settles in, and Yunj finds himself thinking that he has spent so much time living in this era that the modern world is starting to feel more and more like something he only dreamed up rather than a place he actually came from. Just then, the inspector shows up out of nowhere and Yunj looks over at him and asks what brings him here so early in the day. The inspector tells him that he is there to help lift some of the burden off the king's shoulders, since the king has been left with less and less time to focus on and keep up with his political duties lately. Yunj then looks at the inspector and asks him straight up whether he himself is thinking about getting into working out as well, but the inspector waves it off and says that he has far more important things on his plate that need his attention. Later, over at the office of the Inspector General, where an organization that is responsible for looking into and investigating the misconduct of all high-ranking officials regularly meets, one of the inspectors turns to the head inspector official and tells him straight up that tomorrow is the final day of the military training and that he absolutely needs to make a decision right now before it is too late. In a flashback, the official is down on his knees begging the king not to get himself wrapped up in all of this workout business, arguing that his political duties are far more important and should be taking up all of his time and energy instead. The king calmly tells them that they do not need to sit around worrying about him, and that if he goes out and sets a strong personal example during the military training, it is going to prove once and for all just how effective the whole conducting oneself and preparing the body approach really is. When the day of the military training finally arrives, absolutely everyone present is left completely stunned and at a loss for words when they see the king out there moving around with so much energy and life in him. According to the people who have been around him for years, he has shown up to the military training every single year without fail, but every single one of those times he would simply sit himself down in one spot and bark out orders to everyone else without ever getting up or getting involved himself. It turns out that the Inspector General still has it completely set in his mind that Yungj is nothing but a seed of trouble that is going to end up bringing real harm to the king, and because of that deeply held belief he is dead set on finding a way to get rid of him once and for all. At the same time, on a completely different and much happier note, the king is in great spirits because he has finally managed to take down a boar with his own archery skills, which is something he has clearly been working toward for a while. The king then turns to everyone gathered around him and tells them all straight up that every single one of them needs to become a proper expert in conducting oneself and preparing the body from this point on. The following day, Yungjik's brand new machine, which is the last pull down, finally gets delivered right to his doorstep. Yungjik is so genuinely thrilled and excited about it that he jumps on it and gets his workout going right away without wasting a single minute. The fellow man standing nearby then tells him that he has been picking up and learning a whole lot from spending time around him and brings up specifically how he has been taking the method of using a moving pulley and figuring out how to apply it to other devices as well. Hearing that completely catches Yungjik off guard because the technology behind moving pulleys was simply not something that was widely known or in common use by anyone anywhere during this era. After that, Yungjik tells him that the next machine he needs to put together is the leg curl, and the guy looks it over and says that it is straightforward enough to build and that 1 month is more than enough time to get it done. Yungjik then tells him that once he wraps it up he is going to give him some well-deserved vacation time as a reward, but the commander waves it off and flat out refuses, saying that watching the king get healthier and stronger day by day is something he is genuinely enjoying and does not want to step away from. A week after the military training wraps up, over at Inspector General Sukchi's house, the Inspector General is sitting there making plans to head out to Hamgil province where he is going to take on the role of provincial governor and keep a close eye on everything going on there. Some of the officials have caught wind of the fact that during their last visit, eunuch Changxing got his hands on the soap, tried it out, and ended up buying around 100 of them to take back with him. Given how that played out, it is pretty much certain at this point that those soaps have made their way into Wang Jin's hands, and on top of that rumors are going around saying that the guy is raising a hungry ghost somewhere deep within his own body. That night, Yungjik has a strange dream where several famous historical figures from the future are talking about him and the impact he had on Joseon by introducing bodybuilding and fitness training to the kingdom. In the dream, people even mention that Yungjik was eventually exposed as a time traveler in the future, which leaves him feeling nervous and uneasy. When he suddenly wakes up from the nightmare, his elder brother notices his condition and asks if he is alright because his face looks extremely pale. After checking on him, the elder brother tells Yungjik that he should start searching for more disciples because they now need people to fill the roles of trainer and assistant trainer. Yungjik immediately says that Ma Iliang would be suitable for such a position because even though he is the son of a concubine and cannot rise to a high government rank, his abilities and physical talent are outstanding compared to most people. Yungjik also explains that it would be better if they gathered people from different backgrounds and identities instead of relying on only one type of person. However, the elder brother becomes confused and asks why they would even need people with different roles and positions. Yungjik then explains that in order to properly carry out body training and self-discipline at the East Palace, they must also include a member of the royal family among them. It is then revealed that there is actually one person who perfectly fits that role, and that person is none other than Prince Seo-san, the third son of the deposed Crown Prince Yangyang. The following day, Prince Seo-san makes his way to the palace to meet with Yungjik, who takes one look at him and thinks to himself that he comes across as way more ordinary and normal than he ever expected him to be. Yungjik already knows deep down that the reason Prince Seo-san ended up going off the rails the way he did was because his father, Grand Prince Yangyang, openly insulted his concubine in a way that left a lasting mark on him. Yungjik then turns to the prince and tells him straight up that he would like to bring him on as a disciple and pass along to him all the knowledge he carries about conducting oneself and preparing the body properly. However, the moment Iliang steps closer to him, the prince's entire attitude flips completely and he makes it coldly clear that he does not want someone who is the son of a concubine anywhere near him. Even so, the two of them refuse to take no for an answer and force him to get in there and start training with the heavy weights whether he likes it or not. Yungjik then gets in his face and asks him directly whether he has not spent pretty much his whole entire life being looked down on and treated poorly simply because he carries the blood of a deposed crown prince running through his veins. Hearing that cuts right through the prince and he starts tearing up on the spot, telling them that he cannot keep going on like this anymore and turning to Ilyang to apologize for the way he acted toward him earlier. Yungj then lays out the path forward and tells him to buckle down and learn the 3 big exercises, and that once he manages to hit a combined lifting weight of 650 gun, he will seriously consider putting him in charge of running the whole conducting oneself and preparing the body program inside the palace. Later, Yungjik's son comes running over to him and asks why Uncle Hai is always just sitting around after training while Uncle Jungo is flat out lying on the ground. Yungjik's son is already 5 years old at this point, and his whole life has basically been built around the idea of progressive overload from the very beginning, but the life Yungjik left behind in the modern era is starting to feel more and more like something out of a dream that never really happened. Yungjik's second wife has also gotten into working out, but this time around while she is in the middle of using the dumbbell she nearly loses her balance and almost goes down, and Yungjik manages to catch her just in the nick of time before she hits the ground. Deep down, Yungjik thinks to himself that the more and more people start getting into exercise, the more and more people are inevitably going to end up getting hurt along the way. Later on during training, the prince pulls Yungjik aside and tells him that there is someone he really wants him to meet, and that his name is Hyunju. The guy goes on to explain that Hyunju passed the military service exam and went on to work as a private over at the West Gates military garrison. Word going around is that he stepped up and challenged himself to lift a stone that weighed somewhere around 150 gun. He actually pulled it off and managed to get that massive stone, which was roughly the size of a full-grown adult's body, up off the ground, but the moment he did he fell straight forward and could not stop himself. Not long after that, he ended up getting fired from his position because he was no longer able to straighten his back out properly after what happened. The following day, Yungjik goes to meet Hyunju and notices that the frequent meals to nurture his injured back caused him to gain weight. He has even heard that Hyunju refused to stop riding horses even after picking up an injury because his weight kept climbing, and things have gotten to the point where it may no longer be possible to do much of anything about it. After laying all of that out, Yungjik tells him straight up that he actually has something that can help with everything he is going through right now and asks him to put his trust in him and give it a real shot. Before long though, Yungjik figures out that even if Hyunju commits to the whole conducting oneself and preparing the body program, there is simply no way his body is going to be able to handle lifting heavy weights given the condition he is in. Yungjik then tells him to sit down and read through the book carefully and find an approach in there that actually works for his specific situation, which completely catches him off guard since he has never once picked up or read through any kind of medical book in his entire life. Little by little, Yungjik starts pulling together all kinds of different disciples who want to learn from him, but a new problem starts showing itself pretty quickly, which is the fact that people simply do not have anything suitable to wear when they are working out. Yungjik thinks to himself that if something is not done about this soon, people are going to end up doing their outdoor workouts completely commando, and that he absolutely needs to track down a type of fabric that is affordable and easy enough for just about anyone to get their hands on and throw on without any trouble. Later that same day, Yungjik pulls out a t-shirt and shows it to his wife, and she is completely caught off guard and shocked by the sight of this totally unfamiliar style of clothing that she has never seen anything like before in her entire life. Yungjik is glad that his wife approves of the clothes, so he asks the tailor to take them as a sample and begin mass production. Soon, sports t-shirts start rolling out in large numbers. Since they are made from cheap materials, even ordinary people can afford them. One evening, a group of young men gather at Qingwanga Temple to study Sang's book together. Sukju Chu, one of the scholars, notices that another scholar from the same group has been spending a lot of time with the book lately. Mei Jukhian is so deep in his reading that he doesn't even notice how fast time is passing. Sukju wants to ask Mei Jukhian why he suddenly started studying so much. Mei Jukhian tells him that he can't just sit around doing nothing while Yungjik is setting such a strong example through his book. Sukju glances at the book in Mei Jukhian's hands and says he has read a little of it himself and liked what he found. Mei Jukhian also notices that Tang has started repeating the push-ups described in the book. He mentions that Tang has been disappearing and coming back early in the morning, and he thinks Tang is going out for runs in the mountains. Tang confirms this but says Samgon Mountain is too steep for jogging. Sukju suggests that Tang jump rope instead to warm up his body and clear his mind. Sukju then admits that he doesn't think much of Sang's book. He says that while it describes ways to strengthen the body, most of the information seems to be borrowed from other manuals. Tang tells him not to take the book so lightly since the king himself has praised it. Mei Jukhian steps in to stop the argument and suggests they talk about it in more detail the next day. The following morning, Tang, Mei Jukhian, Sukju, and several other scholars meet at the temple again. Mei Jukhian asks Tang to share his thoughts on the book since he has read the most. Tang says the book covers many ways to strengthen the body but doesn't clearly explain the purpose or meaning behind the exercises. Sukju says he doubts Yungjik is a true sage, since religious books are usually written by people of deep wisdom. Mei Juk-hien raises a question from the book about how building the body shows respect for one's parents and admits he isn't fully convinced by that idea. Sukju also worries that many of the exercises require expensive equipment that most people can't afford. To settle their doubts, Tang points to King Yungjik himself as proof that the book works. He says that since Yungjik started following it, he has become a completely different person, and even the ministers of Joseon say the king is more active now than he was in his youth. Tang adds that even with the book's flaws, training still changes the body, and they would be able to walk normally the next day if they started. Mei Juk-hien assumes Tang is telling them to go buy expensive machines, but Tang says they don't need that. They can use rocks and logs of similar weight found nearby, and he also makes it clear that no one is forcing them. After that conversation, Mei Juk-hien and Sukju begin training and keep it up for a whole week. But on the 8th day, they and several other scholars start complaining about extreme tiredness, and everyone stops. Only Tang continues. He is a little surprised at how quickly the others give up and believes they simply didn't have enough patience. About a month later, Chan Young builds new shoulder press and seated row machines for Yungjik. Yungjik wants to test them and calls in a couple of inspectors. Chan Young, however, is thinking about how hard it would be for them if he adds extra weight to the machines. Yungjik praises Chan Young, who says a loyal subject must always work hard for the king. After testing, the inspectors are clearly exhausted. When Ling arrives, the inspectors bow to him immediately. Ling sits down at one of the machines, but the weight is too heavy. He says he will punish the inspectors for mocking him. Yungjik quietly wonders how Ling will react when he finds out it was Yungjik who set the weight. The farmer brings out a small pig that looks more like a baby than a full-grown animal. Yungjik stares at it and thinks the farmer is playing a joke on him, but the farmer swears it is the largest pig on the entire farm. Soon after, Kim Jang, one of the best warriors of Joseon, arrives to deliver news. He tells Yungjik that he has managed to defeat the northern barbarians. Yungjik says that with winter coming, it will be harder for them to reach Joseon's borders. To celebrate Kim Jang's return, Yungjik hosts a small private banquet. As Yungjik pours him a drink, Kim Jang mentions that he has heard about Yungjik's physical transformation and says Yungjik can now rival the Joseon generals. Yungjik is pleased but says he didn't build muscles to shoot a bow or swing a sword. Kim Jang then tells him that something more valuable than weapons was sent north. He explains that it helped reduce the number of soldiers suffering from infected wounds. Yungjik quietly realizes that his distillation invention is now being used widely. However, Kim Jang also mentions a downside. Soldiers started drinking to prevent colds, which caused discipline problems in the unit. Yungjik asks how they handled it. Kim Jang laughs and says they started mixing wormwood into the juice, so any soldier who tried to drink it immediately spat it out. At that moment, General Lee walks past them. Kim Jang recognizes him and invites him to join. Yungjik remembers that Lee is considered one of the strongest warriors in Joseon and performed well in the battles against the northern forces. Lee stops and simply says he is only serving the king and following his will. Kim Jang excuses himself, leaving Yungjik and Lee alone. Lee tells Yungjik he came to learn a new writing and alphabet system. Yungjik studies Lee's build and, for the first time in Joseon, sees someone with a body as strong and toned as his own. Yungjik also recalls from history that when he became ruler and began his purge, General Lee would try to raise an army from the Jan tribe, but his own generals would betray him. This would make General one of the most powerful figures in Korean history, and if Lee survived, Yungjik would have to deal with him personally. The thought makes Yungjik uncomfortable. General breaks the silence and tells Yungjik that rumors of his changes have spread all the way north. He asks if he can visit Yungjik's estate to learn more about his teachings. Yungjik gets the feeling General wants to compete with him but agrees to the visit anyway. The next day, General arrives at Yungjik's estate while Yungjik is training with Ma. Both Ma and the others can hardly believe Lee is an ordinary person. Lee notices a dumbbell in Seosang's hand and asks to try it. Seosang warns him it is heavier than it looks. Lee picks it up and curls it easily. Seosang is stunned since he had only ever used that dumbbell for deadlifting. Lee then mentions he heard that Yungjik once performed 3 basic exercises with a combined load of 1,000 pounds and asks how much Yungjik can currently lift. A few minutes later, Lee lifts a 700 pounds barbell and completes the deadlift cleanly. Yungjik watches and honestly thinks he himself could not lift that even after 6 more months of hard training. He tells Lee it is the first time he has seen anyone handle that kind of weight, and privately thinks that in this era, Lee is something like a man built by God. Yungjik senses Lee is holding something back. He asks him to be honest, admitting that his book has flaws since he did all the research alone. Lee opens up and says the book mostly covers muscle building, but the muscles most needed in combat are barely addressed. Soldiers also need to develop other muscle groups that the book barely mentions. He also points out that the book recommends eating enough meat to build muscle, but ordinary soldiers in the field cannot afford that. Because of this, the book remains more of a theory and cannot really be applied to military training. Yungjik is quietly offended, but he doesn't argue. Even though he is not a military man now, the person he used to be started bodybuilding in the army. He promises himself that within 3 years he will revise and expand his book with proper training methods for soldiers. Elsewhere, Yungjik is reading a new appeal from the ruler of the Ming dynasty. Ling arrives, and Yungjik tells him that the Ming ruler wants to order 100 units of soap and personally meet the person who created it. Since Yungjik has no connections in Ming, Ling suggests sending him as an ambassador, noting that of everyone in Joseon, Yungjik has the broadest knowledge and outlook. Yungjik praises Seo-san for being able to lift 500 pounds in less than a year. He believes Seo-san could become a true master within the next year, but Seo-san disagrees, saying even Hang can lift far more than him. Seo-san then brings up something he had been thinking about for a while. He says he needs to find a concubine since everyone around him is worried that he still has no children. He has already chosen Lady Yun as his concubine. Yungjik thinks about how in the Joseon era, people have children before the age of 20, and a man of 20 who has no wife is usually looking for a concubine instead. Yungjik himself had a similar situation once, with his first son born when he was 23. Yungjik can sense Seo-san is looking for his approval, but he doesn't know how to tell him that his future concubine will one day be killed by Seo-san's own father. Instead, Yungjik tells him that he consulted the Book of Changes and learned that if Seo-san takes a second wife, a terrible fate will come for her. Seo-san is surprised that Yungjik can see something so specific. Yungjik adds that physical strength could help avoid such an outcome. Seo-san interprets this as a warning about something like a thief attacking them, and he asks whether a woman can also develop physical abilities. Yungjik looks at his own wife working nearby and says yes, a woman can build and strengthen her body too. He offers to train Seo-san's future concubine in self-defense and asks Seo-san to grab him to demonstrate. Seo-san grabs Yungjik by the collar of his shirt. Yungjik explains this is the most common move before a fight. He then tenses his arms and strikes Seo-san's forearms sharply, breaking his grip instantly. Seo-san drops to the ground. Yungjik tells him the technique can easily break an attacker's joint if done with full force. After this, Yungjik arranges for Lady Yun to train with his wife. For several years, the two women study self-defense together. Yungjik's wife first shows Lady Yun how to restrain someone from behind. At first Lady Yun doesn't have enough strength to hold her, but after a few days she masters several techniques. Still, she doesn't fully understand why she needs to learn them. Seo-san tells her that one day these skills could save her life. Lady Yun takes that to mean protection from a robber. Sometime later, a servant comes to Yungjik with news that something bad has happened to Yangnyang. Yungjik learns that Yangnyang's left arm is broken and his teeth are badly damaged. Yungjik quietly begins to piece together what must have happened, though he never expected Lady Yun to be capable of causing serious injuries. Yungjik, Seo-san, Lady Yun, and several others gather to find out what really happened. On the day of the incident, Yangnyang was relaxing at home and ordered Seo-san's new concubine to bring him tea. When Lady Yun brought it, Yangnyang was already irritated at how long it took and threw the cup toward her. After he stopped shouting, he took a closer look at her and thought his son had chosen a very attractive girl. He then grabbed her by the collar. Lady Yun panicked and immediately headbutted him in the jaw. The blow was so strong it damaged his teeth and nose. When Yangnyang let go, Lady Yun grabbed his arm and twisted it until it broke. When Yungjik turns to the investigator for a full account, the investigator states plainly that Prince Yangnyang was beaten by his son's concubine, resulting in several serious injuries. Yangnyang, furious, demands that Yungjik execute everyone involved, including Yungjik himself for teaching Lady Yun the technique. Yungjik responds simply that the technique was taught to him by God. The Prime Minister steps in and says that given Yangnyang's character, he was likely trying to harm Lady Yun, and she was only defending herself. The head of the judge's order acknowledges this but also notes that Lady Yun committed a serious offense by injuring a prince. Yungjik finds himself in a very difficult position. He knows about Yangnyang's history of violence, but he still has to rule according to state law. By law, what Lady Yun did could be treated as seriously as treason, which carries the death penalty. Yungjik cannot bring himself to sentence her to death. Instead, he gives her 20 lashes. Lady Yun is tied to a wooden cross for her punishment. She is terrified that the blows will leave her unable to walk. But when the guard swings the whip, the strike is so light that she barely feels it. She quickly realizes the guard feels sorry for her and is only pretending to hit hard. She plays along and screams as though she is in serious pain. Yangniang notices something is off. He stops the guard mid-swing and demands that the blows actually leave her legs damaged. Then he shoves the guard aside, grabs the whip himself, and swings it with full force. But in that same instant, Yungjik is standing right behind him, telling him to stop. Yangniang is stunned as he was always stronger than Yungjik before and can't understand how Yungjik got there so fast. Yungjik is done listening. He tells Yangniang to be quiet and warns him that one more move like that will send him into permanent exile. He yanks the whip from Yangniang's grip, causing him to fall to the ground. Yungjik then reminds him that King Taejong had already banned him from Joseon, and that today Yungjik showed mercy by letting him return. He tells Yangniang that many people have begged him to exile him and that he will no longer overlook his crimes. He orders the guards to place Yangniang under house arrest. Despite his injury, Yangniang protests the whole way as the guards bind and take him away. Yungjik then orders Lady Yun released immediately. Seo-san is overwhelmed with gratitude. Yungjik arranges separate housing for Seo-san and Lady Yun so they can live together peacefully. He tells them they have been through enough and have nothing more to worry about. Shortly after, Yangniang is placed under strict house arrest. A few days later, Yungjik's wife gives birth to a daughter. For a while, life is calm, then one day an unexpected visitor arrives at Yungjik's home. It is Tang, the scholar who had been studying Yungjik's book on body strengthening and healthy living. Yungjik vaguely remembers seeing him before. He is also surprised since the last time he saw Tang, the young man's body has changed so much that Yungjik almost doesn't recognize him. Tang explains that he first picked up the book when his back started hurting badly. After following the exercises, the pain went away. But even after that, he kept training, and over time his body grew much stronger. He came to thank Yungjik personally. Yungjik tells him there is nothing to thank him for since he never trained Tang directly. Tang then asks if he can join Yungjik's training program. Yungjik hesitates. Tang is a member of another group, and if he walks away from his scholarly work, it could affect Joseon's scientific progress. He tells Tang he is a little concerned about such a talented scientist giving up his studies for physical training. Tang replies calmly that his friends are more talented scientists and that things will be fine without him. He has already informed the king that he wants to leave Jipungjang. He also tells Yungjik directly that he wants to become a sports coach. Yungjik agrees to train him and they head off to the training area together. When Tang introduces himself to the group, Seo-san assumes he is a beginner and tells him he still has a lot to learn. Tang doesn't argue and asks Seo-san to teach him. To test what Tang already knows, Seo-san suggests pull-ups, privately thinking it will be difficult for someone new. He even mentions that it took him 6 months of hard training to master the movement. Then Tang starts doing pull-ups with ease. Seo-san begins counting, feeling embarrassed, and starts wondering if Tang is doing the exercise wrong. Yungjik watches quietly and thinks that with Tang around, the others will start pushing themselves harder too. After training, Yungjik and Tang walk to a small open area with a clear view of the mountains. Tang looks out at the forest and estimates that with the amount of raw material available, they could produce around 20,000 pounds worth of goods. He suggests using the linden trees to make soap and selling it to the Ming dynasty for a large profit. Yungjik smiles and says they could gain something more than money. Tang doesn't follow at first. Yungjik tells him they could secure a better future for all of Joseon. Later, the king pulls Yungjik aside and tells him that he heard not too long ago that he managed to cure the back problems of a man named Wu Zhang through conducting oneself and preparing the body program. He also brings up the fact that knowing Yungjik successfully treated Sogol fills him with a real sense of pride. The king then decides to hand him a specific task, telling him that before he heads out to the Ming Empire as their envoy, he needs to make a personal visit to the chief state counselor, Huang Hui, who had gone ahead and requested his own resignation just the previous month. The very next day, Yungjik makes his way over and pays a visit to the chief state counselor, Huang Hui, who is 79 years old at this point. Yungjik tells him straight up that the king personally sent him over to help take care of his body, but seeing just how much of a hard time he is having right now, he honestly is not sure where to even begin. After looking him over and thinking it through for a little while, an idea comes to Yungjik and he tells him plainly that restoring his body back from the kind of aging it has gone through is simply beyond what anyone can do at this stage, but that he would very much like to share with him a way of looking after and taking care of the body going forward rather than trying to cure what has already been done. Back at the palace, the king tells Yungjik that if the counselor had started preparing for oneself and body from a young age then it would have been good for his health. The king then asks him about the preparation for going to the Ming Empire as an envoy and asks if he is going to Hunan after stopping by Beijing. Yungj then opens up and tells him that one of the goals he has in mind for this trip is to bring back livestock, explaining that the pigs that exist in this era are honestly just tiny little mini pigs, and that if he can manage to bring back proper-sized pigs from the Ming Empire, people across all walks of life and regardless of their social status will finally have access to a solid source of protein. The king turns around and tells him straight up that simply going out there to look for livestock is not enough and that he must have some other goal in mind beyond just that. Yungj stands there thinking to himself that from the king's point of view, this trip would mean being separated from his son for roughly a whole year, so he figured it would be a pretty easy sell to get him on board with the idea. Yungj then tells him that he would also like to make a stop in Nanjing along the way to pick up some books while he is there, but the king fires back and asks him whether he really thinks the chief eunuch of the Ministry of Rites who handpicked him for this role is actually going to go out of his way to help him out during the journey. The king then goes on to explain that Wang Zhen is already someone who has gotten so comfortable sitting in power that the ministers around him have actually started calling him father out of the respect and fear he commands. Before he heads out, Yungj goes to spend some time with his family, and his wife is absolutely furious with him for planning to up and leave them all behind for a full year without a second thought. On his way there, Yungj notices that one of their interpreters is coughing in a really rough and nasty way, and right away he thinks to himself that he should grab this opportunity to get him into a proper exercise routine and help him get his health back on track. Before long, they finally arrive at the Ming Empire, which sits at the very center of the known world and commands the attention of everyone who lays eyes on it. As they stand at the gate and take it all in, none of them can even begin to wrap their heads around the fact that human hands actually built something this massive and overwhelming. One of the officials then turns to another palace official and asks when they are going to be able to get an audience with His Majesty, and the official fires back by saying that His Majesty is not exactly the kind of person that just anyone can walk up and have a meeting with, and that it is going to be Grand Prince Suyang who will be granted an audience with His Majesty the Emperor. The guy then tells them that the whole thing is going to take around 40 days to arrange, which catches pretty much everyone completely off guard and leaves them stunned. The official then steps over to Yungj and leans in close to whisper to him that he got around to trying out the soap a little while back, and that it turned out to be quite effective and did everything it was supposed to do. Yungj tells him that even though there is still room to make it better, he is genuinely glad that he is happy with what their product has to offer, and since the soap they had before was not quite fragrant enough for his liking, he made sure to bring along a specially improved version this time around. Yungj then gives them some extra soap that he brought and the guy enjoys the scent of flowers and ginseng is faintly present. Later, Yungj gets the opportunity to meet with the king of this kingdom and greets him warmly with all kinds of respectful and kind words the way the occasion calls for. The emperor then brings up Yungjik's soaps and goes on about just how magnificent and impressive they are. He also adds that the fact that Yungjik himself was the one who actually created them makes it all the more surprising and remarkable to him. The emperor decides that he wants to sit down and talk more about the details of the soap trade at some point in the future with Yungjik, but right in the middle of all of that something about the atmosphere in the room catches his attention and tells him that something is not quite right. Later on, Yungjik sits down to talk business and discuss the pricing of the soap with the mysterious official he crossed paths with before. The official gets straight to the point and tells him that he wants to put in an order for 10,000 GM worth of soap and makes it very clear that every single batch of the new soaps needs to match the exact same level of quality as what he has already seen. The official then introduces himself properly, revealing that his name is Wang Zhen. In return, Wang Zhen asks him if there is anything he wants in return, and Yungjik says that he would like to travel around the Ming Empire to find products that he could take back to his country. Wang Zhen finds that request somewhat easy and says that if he could give him 50,000 Niang silver at once, but Yungjik tries to calm down thinking grain seeds and livestock will one day be worth more than getting money here. The translator then tells Yungjik that he understands why eunuchs were so absorbed in the fragrant soap. He explains that in Joseon, the phalli of the eunuchs are left, but in the Ming Empire, even their phalli are chopped off. Because of this, their entire bodies end up reeking of urine from head to toe, which makes getting their hands on a good supply of soap an absolute must for all of them. The very next day, Wang Zhen goes out of his way to arrange a really impressive and comfortable carriage for Yungjik so that he can travel the rest of the way without too much difficulty. After that, Yungjik turns to his translator and starts making fun of him, poking at him for looking like a fat little bunny and pointing out the way his double chin is just hanging right off his face for everyone to see. Yungjik then tells him with a straight face that they still have a whopping 1,500 li of distance left to cover before they reach their destination, and that starting right now he wants him to run the entire way there instead of riding along comfortably. Once they finally make it to their destination, the Governor-General of Chang'an comes out and welcomes them warmly and makes sure they feel right at home. They even go all out and lay out massive amounts of delicious food in front of Yungj and all the men traveling with him. That night, Wang Jin sits alone with his thoughts and reflects on the fact that back in the day he did not have a single coin to his name, but now even thousands of silver does not even make him blink. On top of that, he finds himself genuinely curious and wanting to see just how much Yungj actually thinks is going to be enough to satisfy him. The following day, Yungj heads out to take a look at one of the pigs and is completely blown away by just how massive it is, to the point where it can actually go toe-to-toe in size with a wild boar. The farmer standing there tells him that the pigs they raise on their land can grow up to 200 gun in just a single year. Yungj then tells him that before they do anything else they are going to have to carefully check the quality of the pigs first, because if they just go ahead and bring in all kinds of different pigs without thinking it through properly, their bloodlines are going to start mixing together and the whole thing is going to turn into one big confusing mess. After wrapping that up, they make their way over to Luoyang, which serves as the capital of the Ming Empire, and one of the guys in the group mentions that the way the people there speak sounds a little strange to him, adding that he heard someone nearby saying something about Joseon being some kind of savage country or something along those lines. Then Yungjik's ears perk up when he overhears someone nearby selling pills that apparently contain ginseng, which was purchased directly from the Joseon prince, with the seller claiming that simply eating those pills alone is enough to make a person's body incredibly strong. Hearing that sends Yungjik over the moon with excitement, since it has only been a single month since they first set out on their journey through the Ming Empire and somehow the rumor has already managed to spread all the way out to this place. The seller goes on to say that what he is offering is the highest grade medicine available, made using ginseng that was obtained directly from the Joseon prince who came to visit Beijing not long ago. Yungjik then pulls his shirt right off and steps forward boldly, announcing to everyone there that he is the Grand Prince Suyang from Joseon. After that, Yungjik jumps straight into a fight with a massive guy who is built even bigger and larger than Yungjik himself. However, since Yungjik is carrying significantly more muscle than the other guy, he manages to take him down and beat him without too much trouble at all. After the whole thing is over, Yungjik turns to the crowd and flexes his muscles right in front of everyone without holding back. Just then, two officials from Joseon come rushing over and tell them that they managed to track down some old books, but the condition they are in is pretty bad and falling apart, so they are planning to ship them back to the country right away before things get any worse. Since the harvest over in Luoyang turned out to be really good that season, they pack up and move on to their next location without hanging around too long. Meanwhile, back in Joseon, the king sits down with his eldest son and tells him that a report just came in from the northern area about a countryman who got shot with a Sechongtong and somehow woke up completely fine afterward. The report also stated that the countryman went on to track down and kill the very person who shot him in the first place, and the reason he survived the whole thing was that he had been wearing leather at the time, and on top of that only a small arrow had been used against him rather than something more powerful. Meanwhile, in Nanjing, the Ming Empire and Yungjik are walking through the market thinking Joseon's farming is rice farming because survival is its first and foremost priority. Joseon was a country founded on a kingdom devastated by invasions by the Red Turbans Rebellion and Japanese pirates. After that, Yungjik goes to a nearby restaurant to have a feast. He then orders all kinds of expensive stuff. The following day, Yungjik makes his way over to the Nanjing shipyard to track down a strange guy who takes one look at Yungjik's physique and cannot help but show his surprise right away. When Yungjik goes ahead and introduces himself, the guy gets even more caught off guard and quickly stumbles over himself to apologize for his reaction. It turns out that the guy's name is Jiju and that building ships is exactly what he does for a living. He launches into an explanation about how he once built a 2,000 Rio vessel that was specifically designed to escort the flagship, which was no small achievement by any measure. After that big project wrapped up, he settled into making a steady living by putting together simpler merchant ships day in and day out. Yungjik then asks him whether he has ever gone ahead and built other types of ships beyond what he normally works on, and the guy takes that as an opening to go on and on about all the different kinds of ships he has put together over the years that have become quite well known in their own right. Yungjik listens and gets genuinely impressed by what he is hearing and then asks him straight up whether he has any plans to take on building a brand new ship again anytime soon. The guy then tells him that he already knows exactly where this is going and that Yungjik wants him to pack up and move to Joseon to build a smaller ship there, but he shuts that idea down flat and straight up refuses without much hesitation. Yungjik then pulls out a blueprint showing exactly what kind of ship he has in mind, and the guy leans in to take a closer look and finds himself genuinely impressed when he sees that this particular design is capable of catching 4 times more fish than a regular fishing boat of the same size. Lastly, Yungjik wraps things up by telling him to come find them at their lodgings within 10 days if he decides that he wants to get in on it and work on the project together with them. Later, Yungjik visits a farm, and once he is done checking out, he goes to see pigs. Yungjik then buys hundreds of piglets from the farmer. That evening, Yungjik sits there thinking to himself that the whole journey through the Ming Empire is finally starting to wrap up and come to a close, and on top of that the silver coins that he borrowed from Chief Eunuch Wang Zhen have completely run dry at this point. Even though the money coming in from exporting the soap is more than enough to cover what was borrowed without breaking a sweat, having to deal with someone whose true thoughts and intentions are impossible to read is something that sits heavily on his mind and keeps him feeling uneasy. The very next day, Yungjik rounds everyone up and gathers them all together since the time has finally come for him to pack everything up and make his way back to Joseon. Before long, one of the fellow men rushes over to the king, who is right in the middle of doing his deadlifts, and tells him the news that Yungjik has come back and brought along a whole load of absolutely massive pigs from the other kingdom. Hearing that, the king is completely caught off guard and cannot wrap his head around why on earth Yungjik would go out of his way to bring back a pig that looks less like a farm animal and more like a full-grown wild boar standing right in front of him. Yungjik then steps in himself and reaches out to grab one of the pigs and wrestle it back into the cage before things get out of hand. Later, the king decides to come out and pay a personal visit to the pigs to get a look at what Yungjik actually brought back with him to Joseon. He is completely taken aback when he sees just how much they look like wild boars standing right there in front of him, and in the spirit of celebrating the whole thing he makes the call to cook up the fattest one of the bunch for dinner that evening. On their way back, Yungjik brings up to the king that since so many books were lost and wiped out during the Goryeo dynasty, he made it a point to track some of them down and bring them back with him. The king looks through what was brought back and points out that the majority of them are focused on farming and commerce, which means the people handling public works and taxation are going to have their hands completely full going through all of it. The king then turns to Yungjik and asks him straight up if there is anything at all he wishes for himself, given just how incredibly hard he worked throughout the whole journey. Yungjik tells him that he has picked up a whole lot along the way, and brings up specifically that if the agricultural methods used in Ming were brought over and applied to Joseon, the way everyday people eat and nourish themselves would almost certainly go through a major shift for the better, and that it could go a long way toward fixing the nutritional imbalances that so many people are dealing with. After that, Yungjik goes ahead and introduces the king to the talented and skilled people he managed to bring back with him from the Ming Empire. Later that same day, Yungjik finds himself genuinely caught off guard and impressed when he sees just how well Jungo has been training so many of the palace officials in his absence. After that, Yungjik decides to teach everyone CrossFit, in which they will perform various exercises to clear away their idle thoughts. First, he steps up and shows everyone how to do a burpee, and the whole group gets genuinely excited when they hear that it does not involve any weights at all. Yungjik then walks them through a bunch of other exercises that they can mix in alongside the burpee and tells them to run through everything twice before taking a break. However, the moment they actually get started and dive into it, every single one of them ends up even more completely wiped out and exhausted than they ever felt when they were doing the heavy weights. After the training session wraps up, Yungjik gets on everyone's case and scolds them for still lacking the kind of strength and endurance they should have built up by now, especially considering that they have already been at this for 6 whole months. He then hands them the book and tells them to sit down and read through it properly, pointing out that both Jungo and Seo-san threw themselves fully into their studies in exactly this way and came out the other side having achieved really great things because of it. Later on, one of the elder brothers gets to work and tests out a brand new shooting weapon that has never been seen or made anywhere in this era before. It turns out that one of Wang's spies is lurking nearby and keeping a close eye on everything they are doing, because Wang specifically sent him out to watch the Joseon prince and find out whether he is in the process of developing any kind of new weapon. The way Wang sees it, anyone who is smart and capable enough to come up with something as impressive as that soap is more than likely also working on putting together a firearm that could eventually be used out on the battlefield. It turns out, the weapon was supposed to be lifted on the shoulder, or propped up under the chin, but when Yungjik's elder brother made it that way, it became unbearable for a human to endure the recoil. Therefore, he devised a shooting method where they wedge this firearm between their side and arm. Yungjik says that the way he sees it, this weapon might be vital during a siege or defending the city. After that, Yungjik decides to try shooting the firearm himself and realizes that the accuracy needs improvement. Later, Yungjik visits an official who drew the blueprint of the Ming Empire's crossbow. He asks him if he can recreate the crossbow's structure. To their surprise, the guy was already working on the crossbow to make it somewhat better. Once they get the crossbow, Yungjik decides to shoot the crossbow himself to showcase the issue with this firearm. When the arrow hits the target, Yungjik realizes that it has high accuracy, which requires the eye and Wapo to be in a straight line. 3 months later, today is the day Yungjik and his elder brother will present the new Wapo. At first, everyone there makes fun of the firearm, thinking that it just makes weird noise and doesn't function properly. One of the old men says that if the enemy is at a distance, it will need to shoot 10 times just to barely hit the target. Next, they bring out and show off the cloud hand cannon, which is capable of firing 2 shots but takes an absolutely ridiculous amount of time to reload after each use. The king then turns to the crown prince and tells him straight up that the first weapon they showed him, the infantry hand cannon, was really hard to consider a proper firearm in any serious sense, and that the second one, the cloud hand cannon, is noticeably slower and less efficient than a simple bow when it comes down to it. However, Yungjik steps in and pushes back by pointing out that the infantry hand cannon was never meant to be a replacement for the bow in the first place, and that on top of that it takes a full 10 years of dedicated practice to raise and develop a truly skilled archer who can perform at a high level. He also brings up the fact that the people they brought out for this demonstration have only been training for a mere half a month before standing up there and showing what they can do. The king is genuinely caught off guard and surprised to hear that, but the elder brother quickly jumps in and tells him that since they have already shown him what marksmen who have only trained for 15 days are capable of pulling off, from this point on he wants to bring in the truly skilled and experienced marksmen to step up and show everyone what they are really made of. After that, the marksmen step up and go through their shooting demonstration, and out of a total of 60 shots fired, only 19 of them actually manage to hit the center of the target. The king says that he finds that genuinely surprising, since that is not the kind of thing that anyone can just pick up and learn in a short amount of time. The elder brother then points out that even a completely ordinary infantryman who has only gone through 2 months of training is able to put up the same level of strength and performance as an archer who has been practicing and refining their skills over the course of several years. To wrap things up, the elder brother and Yungjik make the decision to bring out the 2-inch cannon for the final part of the demonstration, and the shot it fires is so powerful and impressive that it leaves absolutely everyone watching completely stunned and at a loss for words. The king stands there taking it all in and realizes that not only would the barbarians be no match against something like this, but even the northern Yuan people who used to ride through and trample all over Goryeo without breaking a sweat would be crushed easily if they ever came up against it. Before long, the spy wastes no time and gets word back to Wang about the firearms they have seen, and Wang immediately decides that he wants to get his hands on those firearms for himself no matter what it takes. Back in Joseon, the king pulls Yungjik aside and tells him that a serious problem has come up when they tried to move forward with mass producing those firearms. The king then reveals that they have received a letter that came all the way from the Ming Empire. Inside the letter, it states that they have heard about certain objects being made in Joseon and formally requests that those objects be sent over as tribute, since the emperor himself has taken a personal interest in them. Yungjik stands there puzzled and wonders how they even found out about any of this in the first place, and also notes that the letter only refers to them as objects without being any more specific than that, which makes him think there is a chance they might actually be talking about something else entirely. However, the king brings up the concern that if they go ahead and send something else and the Ming Empire ends up discovering that Joseon has new firearms and decides to make a huge issue out of it, the whole situation could spiral way out of control and get really messy really fast. Yungjik then suggests that they send 2,000 as tributes, which completely catches the king off guard and leaves him genuinely surprised by the number. Meanwhile, somewhere else entirely, someone walks up to Yonggi and asks him whether he caught the announcement that went around a little while back saying that on the 5th of next year the government is planning to recruit and put together a brand new unit called the Military Command. Yonggi tells him straight up that he does not have a horse or any archery skills to bring to the table, so there is no way something like that is for him, but the guy quickly tells him that none of that stuff is actually required or expected from anyone. Word going around is that all a person needs to bring with them is an identity tag, and that what they are really out there looking for are people who come with a strong body and the will and drive to push through whatever gets thrown at them. And that is exactly how it happens, as regardless of what social status or background they come from, hundreds of young men and women from all 8 provinces spread across the entire country start showing up with the belief burning inside them that as long as they have a strong enough body, there is nothing stopping them from becoming a military officer. Finally, the 5th of February arrives and a total of 1,052 people show up and gather at the spot, which is a significantly lower number than what Yungjik was expecting and hoping to see. Yungjik stands there thinking to himself that these people do not even have the slightest idea what the Military Training Command actually is or what kind of incredible benefits come along with being a member of it, and that when he thinks about it that way, it is truly a shame that more people did not show up. It turns out that the Minister of War is actually hiding himself behind Yungj because he simply cannot bring himself to stand up and speak in front of that many people all at once. The minister sheepishly admits that up until now he has only ever been responsible for carrying out administrative tasks and has never had to put himself out there like this before. After that, Yungj steps forward and welcomes everyone to the gathering and takes a moment to introduce himself to the whole crowd. He then tells everyone straight up that because the military training command is going to be operating with completely different training methods and weapons from anything used by the existing units in the capital, this is simply not something that every person who showed up today is going to be able to take part in. Only the people who actually make it through the test are going to earn themselves a spot in the military training command and nothing less. Yungj then goes on to explain that the very first test they are going to have to get through is running, and the reason for that is simple, which is that a soldier's entire life depends on how strong and capable his lower body is, and that is even more true for anyone hoping to become a member of the military training command than it is for anyone else. Starting right now, every single one of them has to run all the way from where they are standing to the training center located further back, and their destination is Tanshan. After the training wraps up, a massive total of 649 people end up failing the first test and only 403 people are left standing and still in the running. The second test is designed to check and verify their filial piety through conducting oneself and preparing the body program. The standard they have to meet is that every single one of them must be able to perform inclined bench presses using a total weight that equals at least 80% of their own body weight, along with a handful of other exercises on top of that. Throughout the test, Yungj keeps a close eye on everything and makes sure the second-generation disciples and the Royal Guard instructors are all positioned properly so that nobody ends up getting hurt during the process. When everything is said and done, 221 people are still standing and they are the ones who get selected to move forward. That same night, all of the candidates pack up and make their way over to the Namhansan Fortress training ground, where they are going to be pushed and prepared to handle whatever kind of crisis or disaster might one day come knocking on their country's door. The following day, Yungj sits down and goes through interviews with every single one of the candidates one by one, but there is one particular person who stands out and grabs his attention right away. The boy's name is Hong San, and it turns out he used to live his life as a slave before making it this far. Next up is Yonggi, and the moment Yungj gets a good look at him he is completely stunned as it hits him that this is actually the very same person known far and wide as the infamous human butcher. Yonggi straight up turns to Yungj and asks him point blank why soldiers even exist in the first place if they are not allowed to use harsh and brutal tactics to get things done. Yungj fires back and tells him that he hopes he manages to find that answer for himself by the time he gets through the training and comes out the other side. The following day, all the candidates get back to it and continue pushing through their training, and Yungj even takes the time to teach them that from this point forward every single command system used within the military is going to operate using proper sounds and signals. Because of that, every single one of them who is going to be in a position to lead soldiers is also going to have to sit down and fully master those proper sounds before anything else. Yungj then glances over and notices that Yonggi is actually following his orders without putting up much of a fight or causing any real trouble for the time being. With that in mind, Yungj thinks to himself that if things keep moving in this direction and stay on this track, that guy is going to end up being the one who steps up and leads the very first military training command when the time comes. That evening, San decides that he needs to get out of his tent and take a little walk outside to clear his head and cool down a bit. As he wanders around, he spots one particular tent that still has its lights on inside. Curiosity gets the better of him and he peeks his head in to see what is going on, only to find Iliang in there going hard and training away with some rolling pins all by himself. San then looks at him and asks where exactly he even uses that club he is holding in his hands right now. Iliang steps up and explains that what they are looking at is called meal, and that it is a method specifically designed to build up grip strength and sharpen a person's ability to handle and wield weapons smoothly by slowly rotating a wooden stick in a controlled and deliberate way. However, the moment San gives it a try he is completely wiped out almost instantly and ends up collapsing right onto the ground, lying there wondering to himself who in the world even came up with something like this in the first place. Iliang tells him straight-faced that it was Yungj who created it, and goes on to explain that the specific exercises San will be doing are going to change and vary depending on which weapons he ends up choosing to work with, but since he has not figured out which ones suit him yet, he is going to have to go through and try out every single one of them before any decisions get made. After laying all of that out, Iliang wastes absolutely no time and immediately starts putting him through an absolutely brutal and relentless training session. A full hour later, San drags himself back to his tent completely spent, and as he gets closer he notices Yonggi standing right outside just hanging around. Yongji casually tells him that he got so bored training around people who are too weak to keep up with him that he just decided to come out here and get some extra exercise in on his own for a little while. San then looks over and spots blood covering Yongji's arm, and Yongji glances back at him and calmly tells him that Yungjik has his eyes on him right now, so he should turn around and head back inside before anything else happens. The next day, Yungjik's elder brother decides to show his strength to the king and queen. He then manages to easily do 140 gun bench presses, and the king gets impressed to see that. Lastly, he decides to try deadlifting and easily does 180 deadlifts, and everyone says that he may have started late, but is quick in learning. After that, the king wants to see Yungjik's further achievements in conducting oneself and preparing the body. When Yungjik takes off his shirt, both the king and queen are surprised to see his insane physique. Yungjik then shows them 440 gun squatting. After doing squats and bench press, Yungjik gets amazed on how he could be able to perform like this. The king then tells him to take a quick break, but Yungjik says that he has already taken breaks, so now he is going to perform a deadlift. The king then gets excited and tells someone to draw Yungjik's body on an 8-panel folding screen before he goes to Beijing. He also wants to place the folding screen in the exercise hall, to serve as an example for those who are working on conducting themselves and preparing the body. Yungjik tells the king that leaving his body for generations to see is embarrassing, but the king says that since he lifted 1200 gun weight, this is going to be remembered forever in history. Later, over at the military training area, Yungjik gathers everyone together and tells them that starting from today they are going to be splitting the military up into different specialized types and kicking off training that is specifically tailored to whatever weapon each group is going to be working with. He also makes it clear that the marksman is the one who is going to be responsible for handling the brand new firearm that was developed by the crown prince. After a little while, one of the fellow men comes over to Yungjik and fills him in that the final numbers for the military trainees have been sorted out, coming in at 41 shieldmen, 51 spearmen, and 63 longswordsmen along with 66 marksmen. Yungjik looks the numbers over and immediately realizes that the marksman count is not nearly as high as he would have liked it to be. The shieldmen meanwhile are standing there staring at their shields with wide eyes, thinking to themselves that these things are so incredibly heavy that just moving around properly while carrying one is going to be a serious challenge all on its own. The very first thing their training kicks off with is rotating and turning the shield in every possible direction, which is going to feel brutally heavy at first but is something they are going to get used to over time as their bodies adapt. Yungjik keeps pushing forward with the training because he wants everyone to be fully prepared well in advance, since nobody knows exactly where the cannons that are being sent over to Ming are going to end up hitting when the time comes. Yungjik then looks over and is genuinely caught off guard when he spots San over there going absolutely all out and spinning and turning his shield in every direction imaginable with way more enthusiasm than anyone else around him. A full week goes by since the specialized training for each individual soldier type first kicked off. As the difficulty of the training keeps climbing higher and higher, some people start dropping out and falling behind, and it becomes pretty clear that a month and a half is more than enough time to completely change a person from the inside out. San and the rest of the group are now kicking back and enjoying their food together out in the forest, and he turns to his teammate and tells him that coming here is what made him discover just how incredibly delicious pork actually is. Finally, Yungjik gathers all the candidates together and tells them straight up that they are really starting to look and carry themselves like proper soldiers now, and that just as they already learned and experienced during the admission process, a soldier's entire life revolves around the strength and conditioning of their lower body above all else. He then makes the announcement that in 2 days they are going to be heading out on a march, so every single one of them needs to make sure they are fully ready and prepared before then. One of the soldiers pipes up out of curiosity and asks him what exactly the march is going to involve, and Yungjik tells him plainly that they are going to be walking the mountain path from morning all the way through until evening, covering a total distance of 40 kilometers. 2 days later, the entire squad is out there pushing through the forest together while rain is coming down all around them. Yungjik calls out to everyone and tells them to make sure they eat a grain of salt every time they take a drink of water, and that anyone who has already run out of water does not need to stress about it since they are going to be provided with more water as soon as they reach the next hill. Hearing all of that, the soldiers light up and get genuinely excited, feeling deep down that having someone like Yungjik standing above them as their superior makes everything they are going through feel completely worth fighting for. Yungjik looks over at Hong and thinks to himself that Hong was always an extraordinary person right from the very beginning, but that San on the other hand came in looking really weak and has since grown and developed at a surprisingly fast pace. During September, the third prince of Joseon, Yong, makes his way over to the Ming Empire and sits down to meet with the emperor face to face. The emperor then asks him whether he would be willing to write out a phrase for him since he is known to practice calligraphy. The emperor also goes on to ask him directly why they did not go ahead and make use of the hand cannon during their fight with the wild men when they had the chance. Yungj responds by saying that it simply would not be right or appropriate for civilized people like themselves to resort to something like that in that kind of situation. He also makes a point of telling the emperor that the weapon itself is absolutely excellent in terms of what it can do, since it is capable of piercing straight through armor without any trouble at all, and that soldiers can become fully proficient in using it after just 1 month of training, which means the Ming Empire would have absolutely nothing in the entire world to fear if they had it on their side. Lastly, Yungj wraps things up by telling him that they came all the way over here fully prepared and ready to present 2,000 hand cannons as tribute. Meanwhile, back at the Joseon military training headquarters, Yunj gets hit with the news that he is being dismissed from his position entirely due to allegations of abusive behavior directed toward Hong. Meanwhile, Jian is walking through Dragon Cave in Nagan, a place filled with caves and Buddhist statues. Inkong, one of Joseon's painters and sculptors, is with him and explaining the site as they walk. Inkong wants to show Jian some new statues that recently appeared. When they get close, both of them notice that the statues look suspiciously like Yunj. Inkong approaches one of the sculptors and asks where the image came from. The sculptor explains that about 2 years ago, a couple of people were selling fake medicine on the streets of Beijing. An unknown man stepped in and struck one of the fraudsters down. People said it was the King of Strength himself. An artist nearby captured the man's image that day, and it eventually influenced how Buddha was depicted in the new statues. Inkong remembers Yunj once telling him about a similar incident during his time in Beijing and finds the whole thing amusing. Jian, however, is furious. He is angry that the sculptors made Yunj look like he had a large belly, which he finds disgraceful. Inkong tries to calm him down, worried that Jian's reaction is drawing attention. Jian cannot let it stand. He decides to delay his trip to Beijing and instead carve the real image of Yunj himself. Sometime later, Jian and Inkong arrive at a massive rock face 20 meters high. Standing before it, Jian tells Inkong that Yunj stands out not just for his body but for his mind, and he wants to portray him as a bodhisattva. A few months later, a group of sculptors led by Jian complete the statue. Inkong says it gives off an unusual dark presence and faintly resembles a celestial black dragon. Back in Joseon, the Chongyang Mountain Festival arrives, a time when people visit the mountains and take in the beauty of autumn. Yunj uses the occasion to show his father the results of his soldiers' training. When the soldiers greet Song, their movements are almost perfectly synchronized. Song is impressed and tells them they will serve as an example not only for future soldiers but for all of Joseon. Song then asks Ling to evaluate the soldiers. Ling steps forward and orders them into battle formation. Shield bearers move to the front, spearmen line up behind them, and archers take position at the rear. To test them, the royal soldiers cut ropes releasing several heavy rolling logs toward the unit. The shield bearers lock their shields and absorb the impact, then immediately switch to small axes and chop the logs apart in seconds. Next, the spearmen are tested. Each one has to strike the marked weak points on a dummy as fast as possible. Yunsung finds the test too easy and simply cuts his dummy to pieces. Finally, the archers are tested. Soldiers take turns firing at a small target placed in the center of the field. At the end, they roll out a large weapon loaded with hundreds of explosive arrows, all fired at once. The arrows hit simultaneously and completely destroy the target. Song is deeply satisfied and believes that with this army and these weapons, no country would dare fight Joseon. A couple of days later, senior Joseon general and Chingik receive a letter confirming that the combat testing was successful and that many of Yunjik's soldiers have been approved for active military service. Chingik acknowledges that these are extraordinary soldiers, well beyond the level of ordinary troops. However, he also points out that despite their impressive training, they have no real battlefield experience, which gives no guarantee of survival against a true threat. He also notes that the training program did not prepare them for extremely low temperatures. One of the guys concludes that while the program is good, it is far from complete. He wants to contribute to it. He suggests that rather than training soldiers in mountain ranges generally, only a select group of a few dozen should be sent into that terrain, since it is dangerous even for the most experienced warriors. He also says he will assign a local guide to each group so they do not get lost in the harsh conditions. The soldiers arrive in Henan, where the next stage of their combat training is set to begin. Chingik greets them and tells them plainly that Hanyang is a brutal and unforgiving place, ruled by bandits and severe cold. Two of Chingik's own men step forward and show the soldiers the scars they carry and the ears they lost to frostbite. Chingik then announces their first test, like climbing to the top of Mount Babam in the bitter cold and leaving something at the summit as proof they made it. 30 soldiers and 2 commanders are to make the climb, and they must do it fast. After the soldiers decide who will go, a local resident arrives to guide them. Yunsung tells the man they need to plan their route first and asks if he is truly willing to come along. The resident says he understands his duty, but warns them that the places they are heading are far harsher than anything they have seen so far, and that even the most experienced local hunters risk their lives there. Yunsung cuts him off and tells him that if he is not coming, he can leave. Hangan mentions that one of their past trainers was from Gapsan and had given them a lot of useful advice for mountain conditions. Yunsung, growing irritated, cuts that conversation short too and orders everyone to pack up and move out. Chingik watches their confident faces and is not reassured. He doubts that confidence alone will keep them alive up there and quietly suspects they may lose a few fingers before this is over. He also notices strange iron rods in their packs and can't figure out what they are for. As they begin climbing, the resident notices the soldiers are carrying heavy shields and weapons up the mountain. Hangan says this is nothing for them. He also mentions they have special devices that make moving on icy surfaces easier. When the resident asks who came up with those, Yunsung thinks briefly of the moment Yungjik struck him in the face for breaking discipline, then simply says it was all Yungjik's idea and tells everyone to stop talking. By evening, the soldiers find a good spot and set up camp quickly. The resident is surprised at how fast they manage it. Hangan explains that Yungjik originally planned to train them in mountain survival but ran out of time. Meanwhile, Hangan cooks a military stew whose smell draws the resident's curiosity. Hangan gives him a portion and explains the recipe for pork that is roasted, dried, and ground, then seasoned with spices. This time he used cinnamon and dried cherries. The resident loves it. Once the tents are set, Hangan organizes the night watch. He pairs the soldiers up and assigns them to 3 rotating positions around the camp. Late in the night, Yunsung sits alone by the dying fire keeping watch when Hangan approaches him. Hangan tells him he should try to be a little kinder to the other soldiers. Yunsung says that showing too much warmth would only give them room to take advantage of him. He tells Hangan that if he has a problem with his command style, he can say so directly. He also warns Hangan that he already knows about the time Hangan left the camp area without permission and reported it to Yungjik. Before heading back to his tent at the end of his watch, Yunsung tells Hangan to be careful, suggesting he might not be so forgiving next time. The next morning, all the soldiers and the local resident reach the summit and plant their flag. The resident says he has climbed this mountain many times before but this ascent felt easier than usual. Then Yunsung looks up and sees dark clouds gathering. He immediately orders the soldiers to break camp and prepare torches so that they cannot stay on the mountain. While he is giving the orders, a large tiger appears behind him, ready to attack. Yunsung draws his blade fast enough to wound it, but the wound is not deep enough to stop it. Within seconds the tiger is ready to strike again. Hangan grabs his shield and charges toward Yunsung. He reaches him in time and blocks the next attack, but the force of the blow is enough to knock him off his feet. Behind them both is a ravine, and they tumble over the edge, falling all the way down to the foot of the mountain. The rest of the soldiers watch in horror, unsure how to help. Back during training, Yungjik once ordered his soldiers to complete 31 repetitions of an exercise called touching the heavens with their feet, raising straight legs to the left, then up, then to the right. The soldiers thought it was nearly impossible. Yungjik didn't care. He counted every rep, and whenever a soldier bent their legs he stopped counting until the form was corrected. By the time they pushed through all 31 sets, many soldiers could barely breathe. When Yungjik asked how many total attempts it took before their last clean rep, the soldiers were too exhausted to speak. Back on the mountain, both Hangan and Yunsung land in the snow at the base of the cliff and survive. Tree branches and soft snow broke most of the fall. Hangan checks on Yunsung, who opens his eyes and says he is fine. They estimate only a few minutes have passed. Hangan says they need to get back to the others quickly, but Yunsung notices a large bloodstain on Hongan's side. Despite the injury, they start walking. After a few minutes, Hangan tells Yunsung he can't go on and insists Yunsung leave him and continue alone. He says he doesn't want to hold Yunsung back and that he will make it back to camp on his own in a few days. Yunsung spots fresh tiger tracks nearby and can't understand how Hangan expects to stay there alone with a predator roaming close by. Hangan tells him not to worry. Yunsung looks at him, injured and barely standing, and after a moment quietly agrees to go. He tells Hangan not to stay in that spot too long. A few minutes after Yunsung leaves, Hangan sits down against a tree with his weapon in his hands and waits. He studies the tracks again and decides they are not as fresh as they first appeared, which is that the tiger has likely been circling them for a while. Then the same tiger appears, the one Yunsung wounded at the summit. Hangan notices the animal was hit in the eye, which likely damaged its vision. He figures this gives him one real chance as a clean shot to the head with his gun. The tiger charges. Han Gan takes aim and fires, but misses. The tiger keeps coming, and Han Gan accepts that these may be his last moments. Then Yunsung reappears and drives his blade into the tiger, killing it. He looks down at Han Gan and says he hopes he doesn't regret coming back. He also admits, somewhat flatly, that he only returned because showing up at camp alone might have made him look bad as a commander. Han Gan asks if Yunsung still holds a grudge against Yungjik for the punishment he gave him. Unknown to both of them, one of Yungjik's assistants spotted Yunsung outside the camp earlier that evening and reported it to Yungjik, suggesting Yunsung should be expelled permanently. The assistant worried that keeping him around would eventually damage Yungjik's reputation. The next day, Yungjik uses his own methods to discipline Yunsung for leaving the camp. That evening, Ma asks Yungjik whether such harsh treatment is really necessary, pointing out that it is causing unrest among the soldiers. Yungjik says the method is meant to keep the discontent directed at the punishment rather than at Yunsung, giving him time to reflect. Ma suggests a stern reprimand would have been enough. Yungjik disagrees. He says Yunsung is too proud and a simple reprimand would only make things worse. He also makes clear this is not how he handles anyone else. At that moment, Han Gan is nearby and overhears Yungjik tell Ma that he genuinely believes someone like Yunsung has a lot to offer Joseon. Yunsung, who is also within earshot, says quietly that he let go of any resentment toward Yungjik a long time ago. Shortly after, a group of soldiers and the local resident find Han Gan and Yunsung alive. Meanwhile, heavy snow begins falling in Hanyang. Chingik knows this means the snowfall in the mountains where Yungjik soldiers are training is several times worse. He immediately sends his best warriors up to find them and bring them back. One of Chingik's soldiers warns him that the snowfall at the summit is too heavy and that even if they ride out immediately, they may not reach all the soldiers in time. Chingik says that if these warriors die, it is entirely his fault, and he refuses to sit and wait. He mounts his horse and orders every soldier who can ride and knows mountain survival to follow him. But the moment the gates open, Chingik and his men find themselves face to face with all of Yungjik's soldiers, standing right there in formation and saluting him. Chingik is stunned. He asks how they made it back. Yunsung tells him they planted their flag at the summit and completed the task. He then shows Chingik the dead tiger and briefly explains what happened, how it attacked them, how he and Han Gan dealt with it, and how they brought the body back as proof. Yunsung apologizes for returning later than expected. Chingik can hardly believe that young, inexperienced soldiers managed to kill a tiger that even seasoned mercenaries had failed to handle. The local resident confirms that it was just two men, Yunsung and Han Gan. Yunsung tells Chingik they were able to survive only because of Han Gan. One of Chingik's soldiers doubts the story and demands proof. Chingik, looking at them all, decides he has seen enough. Despite their lack of real combat experience, these soldiers clearly have what it takes. All the soldiers who took part in the expedition are promoted. Han Gan is given the honor of training Chingik's new recruits. On his first day, the recruits openly say the story about defeating the tiger is made up. Han Gan holds his temper, greets them calmly, and announces the start of training. The recruits are unsettled by how composed he is. He tells them the training will be easy and they have nothing to worry about. They push back again, demanding he admit the story is a lie. Instead of saying anything, Han Gan takes off his outer clothing. The recruits go quiet. He points to the scar on his side and tells them plainly that if the wound had been a little deeper, he would have bled out. Then, with a straight face, he adds that up in the mountains he also killed a second tiger and ate it to keep his strength up for the journey back. The recruits stare at him. Han Gan says tiger meat is considered a delicacy in some places and he is sorry they will probably never get to try it. By this point the recruits are convinced their new trainer is completely out of his mind and that there is no telling what he might do to them. Han Gan then tells them to each pick up a stick. The recruits, terrified, assume he is about to beat them. Instead, he picks up his shield, walks outside, and tells them they will take turns attacking him while he defends. If anyone breaks through, he will reward the whole group with 5 times the normal rice portion. That gets their attention immediately and they rush at him. After a few hours, every recruit is exhausted and not one of them has gotten through. Han Gan tells them that since he has proven his strength, they will now follow every instruction he gives. One soldier nervously suggests they settle things over a drink instead. Han Gan ignores him and tells them all to prepare as they are starting the exercises Yungjik taught him. Meanwhile, Jian has returned from his journey through the Ming dynasty with good news. He tells Yungjik that he and the Ming emperor resolved the matter of tribute and weapons, which greatly pleases Yungjik. Yungjik is also happy just to have his younger brother home. Jian tells him that during his travels he had the chance to speak personally with descendants of Confucius about their ideas on food and body culture, and that they were deeply impressed by the respect Yungjik shows for his ancestors. Jian then hands Yungjik a bundle of paper as a gift. Inside is a drawing of Dragon Moon Grotto, the place Jian visited. He tells Yungjik that the place now has a special connection to him since the statue he carved there has been drawing admiration and bringing in visitors. He also mentions how angry he was when he first saw the original statue as the one that made Yungjik look overweight. Yungjik is moved by everything Jian did and says he hopes to visit the statue himself one day. The next morning, while Yungjik is training with his son, guests arrive. Yungjik remembers that he and Leong were supposed to visit the hot springs that day. Among the arrivals is Leong W., the son of Leong and Yungjik's nephew. Later, a kid gets really curious about Yungjik's trip to Ming and asks him straight up whether it is actually true that ships cross over mountains out there. Yungjik tells him that they do not actually cross the mountains themselves but instead follow the river that runs right between them, and goes on to explain that the Grand Canal they use was originally built way back by Emperor Yang of Sui a very long time ago. The scholar from the Hall of Worthies then walks over to them and tells the kid to get himself together and ready because it is time for him to sit down and study. The kid immediately starts sobbing and does not want to go, and Yungjik steps in and tells the scholar that he is going to take over and teach him something himself for a little while. After that, Yungjik pulls out a badminton set and gets right into playing with the boy while at the same time telling him all about conducting oneself and preparing the body and why it matters so much. He tells the boy that badminton is actually a really important activity for a person to take up since it comes packed with a whole load of benefits for both the body and the mind. Then when Yungjik takes his swing and shoots the ball, it flies with so much force that it completely blows right through the wall sitting behind the guy on the other side. It turns out that after spending time practicing the test version of badminton with Mr. Ma earlier, Yungjik ended up putting way too much strength and power behind his swing without even realizing it. After that, Yungjik keeps going and continues playing at a slow and easy pace with the young boy, and the scholar standing there watching all of it starts wondering to himself what kind of teaching Yungjik is trying to replace the evening study sessions with by doing something like this. Yungjik thinks to himself that after the elder brother comes back from the hot springs, he is almost certainly going to want to sit down and check in on how much progress Hongwei has been making with his learning. Yungjik then turns to the scholar and tells him straight up that if a person builds their body through badminton, it is going to lay a really solid foundation for the conducting oneself and preparing the body program down the road and make everything that much more effective. After laying that out, Yungjik gets right back to it and keeps on training the young boy in badminton, and before long his own son wanders over and jumps in to join them as well. After a little while of watching from the side, even the scholar ends up caving and joins in on the badminton session, despite the fact that he could not stand the idea of it when it was first brought up. When Yungjik's wife shows up and tells everyone that it is time to wrap it up and come inside for dinner, Yungjik is not even close to being done and ends up pushing her to give badminton a try for herself before anyone goes anywhere. Before long, badminton completely takes on a life of its own and turns into a brand new obsession that spreads through the people of Joseon, with pretty much everyone getting in on it and thoroughly enjoying every second of it. The following day, the king sits down with the head of the device makers and tells him that after going through several failures and setbacks, he has finally managed to push through and come up with a genuinely improved version of the infantry hand cannon. The elder brother steps in and says that all of the credit really needs to go to His Highness the Grand Prince Yungjik, because without the inventions and ideas he brought to the table none of this progress would have been possible in the first place. He goes on to explain that things got tricky at one point when the axis in the steps device they had been using recently bent out of shape and had to be completely rebuilt from scratch before they could move forward. With that all behind them now, the king and the head device maker step forward together and unveil the brand new steps device that they have put together. They also share that based on what the military supplies department alone is capable of producing, they are looking at being able to put out at least 2,000 infantry hand cannons every single year without much trouble. While the cloud hand cannon do offer a clear advantage when it comes to range and raw power, the downside is that it requires grooves to be carefully carved into it, which adds time and complexity to the whole process. Yungjik then turns to the king and asks him directly whether there is a specific reason behind why he has been pouring so much focus and attention into firearms lately. The king then opens up and reveals that earlier that same year an imperial rescript came in all the way from Ming stating that they were going to be moving forward with punishing the arrogant northern Yuan people very soon and that they were calling on Joseon to cooperate and get fully on board with the effort. Yungjik then asks straight up whether they are actually going as far as demanding that Joseon send reinforcements from their own military to support their campaign, and the king confirms that they have gone ahead and ordered 20,000 mounted soldiers and 80,000 regular ones to be stationed over in Weiju and strike the northern Yuan from behind. Later on, the entire palace is in an absolute uproar over the fact that they have been asked to commit that staggering number of soldiers to someone else's military campaign. The king then tells everyone plainly that it is simply not possible for them to flat out reject every single one of Ming's demands, which means that sending troops over is something they are going to have to go ahead and do regardless of how anyone feels about it. One of the old officials pipes up and suggests that they could go ahead and send 60,000 regular troops along with their supporters as a way of meeting the demand without going completely overboard. It turns out that even after the Yongle Emperor went ahead and successfully brought the northern Yuan under control, completely driving every last nomad out once and for all turned out to be simply impossible to pull off. Because of that, the Yongle Emperor eventually came around and allowed a system of tributary trade to be set up with the northern Yuan, and over time this particular form of trade came to be known as the horse markets. Ming was buying up horses as a way of slowly chipping away at and weakening the northern Yuan's power base, while the northern Yuan on their end went along with the horse markets reluctantly and only because they were running short on the basic daily necessities they needed to survive. Over at the northern Yuan Eisenteischer's place, one of the Yuan guys steps up and tells their leader straight up that the Ming Empire went ahead and unilaterally broke the established customs of the horse market and has been going out of their way to persecute them without any justification. The ruler of the northern Yuan, Eisenteischer, sits there taking it all in and even starts wondering out loud whether it would be worth sending an envoy over to Joseon, since if Ming ends up killing or driving out their messenger it is going to look an awful lot like Joseon was in on some kind of scheme with Ming all along. A few days later, one of the Yuan members makes the trip over to Joseon and shows up to tell them that since their former countries once entered into a marital pact together, the time has come to sit down and form a brand new brotherly one to replace it. Hearing that sends Yungjik into a fury as he thinks to himself that it has not even been a full century yet since the Yuan dynasty was pushed out and driven off the Korean peninsula for good. Every year, hundreds of princesses were taken away, thousands of subjects were enslaved, and forced conscription led to countless deaths in distant foreign lands. He also wonders whether turning the entire country into something that resembles a slave-like state is really what they mean when they throw around the word brotherly to describe their relationship. The Yuan guy also brings up to the king that recently the Ming Empire has been pulling back on trade and actively trying to cut off and limit access to essential iron items that Joseon depends on. Surprisingly, the king does not push back and instead tells them to go ahead and give them 1,000 rolls of cotton and 50 iron pots without making a big deal out of it. Once the envoy wraps things up and leaves, Yungjik turns to the king and asks him straight up why he decided to just hand over what they were asking for without putting up any kind of resistance. The king tells him that by doing that they managed to buy themselves some time, but that sooner or later they are going to get to the bottom of whatever is really going on behind all of this anyway. Meanwhile, up on the northern side of Joseon, all of the ministers have gathered together in one place and are sitting down to talk through and assess the current condition and state of the kingdom. Just then, a guy by the name of Wangbang shows up out of nowhere, and even after having traveled such a long and grueling distance and fighting his way through bandits along the way, he still carries himself and gives off an incredibly strong and commanding military presence that is impossible to ignore. On June 1st of the lunar calendar, 3 armies set out to subjugate Li Manju. One of the army talks about Joseon soldiers have set out from Weiju. The guy further says that they heard the news 4 days ago, so by now, they must have advanced quite a bit. He also says that one cavalry unit is heading towards Shenyang, another is departing from Weiju, while the soldiers are marching northward from Joseon's Kangi area. Hearing that, the guy freaks out thinking that despite many times they have killed and plundered those Joseon guys, never before have they moved a unit on such a large scale. The guy then says that it seems like the Ming dynasty has abandoned them. He also throws out the suggestion that they should just cut their losses and run, but the guy completely freaks out and says that if word gets around that they turned tail and fled from a small and relatively minor force like Joseon, whatever little bit of standing and credibility they still have left is going to be completely wiped out and gone for good. Deep down, the guy is thinking to himself that before the Joseon army manages to track him down and close in on him, he needs to get out there and pull together and absorb all of the scattered Jurchen people he can find before it is too late. The chief then steps up and lays out the plan, saying that they are going to push their troops through the mountain route, and that going that way means they are not going to have anything to stress or worry about on that front. He also makes it clear that what they should really be turning their attention and concern toward right now is not the group of people climbing up through the mountains from Kangi, but the cavalry unit that is the real threat they need to be thinking about. Meanwhile, a battle is already underway between 2 opposing teams going at it hard. The other team's head turns to his soldiers and tells them that if they push through for just 2 more days along the mountainous route, they are going to arrive right at Manju's base and be in position to make their move. 2 days later, the team finally drags themselves to the northern mountains and finds themselves with absolutely no choice but to go ahead and launch their attack. Meanwhile, the chief of Li Manju turns to his team and tells them to make sure the horses are fed until they are completely full, and to get all of their stuff packed up and ready so that they can move out at a moment's notice if things go sideways. Just then, one of the bald guys from before suddenly shows up and rushes over to tell the chief that those Josian guys are on their way and closing in fast. The chief spins around and sure enough finds the Josian soldiers already making their way straight toward them without slowing down. One of the soldiers on the other side looks at the formation coming toward them and notices that something about it seems a little off and unusual, and starts wondering out loud why there appears to be an extra line of soldiers positioned behind the main group. The chief looks it over and figures out that those are archers in the back, and then points out that Josian bows are not going to hold up well against rain, and that the glue holding them together has probably softened up and weakened during their long march through the wet conditions. Then without any warning at all, the Josian soldiers open fire and use their hand cannons to gun down a whole bunch of people in one sudden and overwhelming burst. The moment the soldiers start going through the process of reloading, the chief sees the opening and tries to push his forces forward and charge as fast as they possibly can to close the gap. However, the Josian soldiers hold their ground without flinching and keep firing straight ahead, continuing to cut down enemy soldiers one after another without letting up. Even with the situation getting more and more intense by the second, the chief and his soldiers refuse to back down and charge forward. The chief then calls out to everyone and tells them to wipe out every single one of them, and makes it clear that the ones coming in on horseback are going to be taken down with the hand cannons. The Josian High Chief then calls out to the infantry hand cannoneers and tells them to hold tight to the formation and get themselves ready to open up with volley fire. After that, the Josian soldiers let loose and fire their cannons straight into the opposing forces, and manage to take out the majority of them in one devastating wave. Just then, word comes in that the barbarian cavalry has been moving around and flanking them from the side, so the soldiers are immediately told to redirect and hit them with the infantry hand cannoneers before they can do any more damage. Eventually, the Josian soldiers and their chief start looking around and wondering out loud whether Li Manju somehow slipped away and managed to escape from the battlefield all by himself. Then to everyone's complete surprise, Li Manju comes crashing through the jungle and runs straight into Hong, who looks at him dead in the eyes and tells him flat out that he is going to finish him off right here and right now, and that there is absolutely no point in getting down on his knees and begging for his life. After that, Hong and San make their way over and meet up with the right flank commander, and the Josian commander wastes no time and brings out Li Manju's severed head right there in front of them. The guy responds by saying that it was thanks to Li Manju making the decision to send his troops over to deal with the right flank that the left flank finally got the opening it needed to make its move. The guy stands there thinking to himself that while he spent all that time tied up dealing with at most 200 people on his end, the infantry over on the other side went ahead and finished off Li Manju completely on their own without any help. The guy then turns to the commander and asks him what ended up happening to all the horses that the enemy forces had been using, and the commander tells him that since the left flank does not have any cavalry of their own, actually riding those horses around is more trouble than it is worth. So they made the call to open up with concentrated fire and take the horses down right from the very first moments of the battle before they could become a problem. He also mentions that some of the horses were set aside and used as rations for the soldiers, while the rest were handed over to the cooperative barbarians who were working alongside them. Hearing all of that, the elder gets absolutely furious on the inside but manages to keep his face fairly steady and does not let much of his reaction show on the outside. Finally, July rolls around and the Li Manju subjugation army makes its way back to Josian after everything is said and done. The king then makes the call to recognize and praise all of the generals for what they pulled off and makes sure they all walk away with a really solid reward for their efforts. Outside, the old man pulls Yungj aside and tells him that when the military training command soldiers first headed out into Namhansan, he was genuinely worried and concerned about how they were going to hold up and handle themselves when things got really fierce and intense out there. Another general then walks over to Yungj and tells him that he has been hearing about the role he played in training the ordinary soldiers within the military training command and what a difference it made. He also tells him that it really hit him and got him thinking that the main reason their armored soldiers have not been able to step up and earn any real merits out there comes down to the fact that they simply have not been put through the kind of proper and thorough training that they actually need. The general goes on to explain that the foundation of the cavalry is slowly drying up and crumbling, and that the treatment and support given to the people known as the armored soldiers may end up getting cut off entirely before too long if something does not change. Meanwhile, on a completely different side of things, the Ming Emperor sits back and openly acknowledges that Josian has genuinely managed to accomplish something that was not easy to pull off by any stretch of the imagination. Wang then steps forward and brings up the fact that an official report has also come in specifically addressing and highlighting the usefulness and effectiveness of the infantry hand cannons out in the field. Meanwhile, one of the guys from the other nation makes his way over to pay a visit to a famous Khan and asks him straight up whether he has received any news lately about what has been going on. The Khan, who is clearly busy and distracted with the ladies around him, tells him that he has not heard anything about anyone and makes it plain that what he really wants to see is him going out there and wiping those Ming guys completely off the map. The guy fires back and says that if the world actually ran on thoughts and wishes alone, the Ming Emperor would have been torn to pieces 1,000 times over by now. He also brings up the fact that they have been making use of some really strange and unusual weapons for several years now that nobody quite understands yet. The Khan then tells Taisher to go ahead and draw out what he saw so everyone can get a look at it, and when he does, what ends up on the paper turns out to be a hand cannon. The Khan takes one look at it and quickly figures out that it is a firearm, and that it was used to carry out a massacre against the dregs of the Jin dynasty not too long ago. Taisher then turns to the Khan and asks him how something as small as a hand cannon could possibly produce that kind of deep and overwhelming sound when it goes off. The Khan explains that what is happening is that there are several hand cannons all firing off at the exact same time, and that when they all go off together like that it sounds like thunder cracking and striking right next to you. It turns out that when everything is counted up, the total number of active armored soldiers across the entire Hanyang area comes out to around 3,000. Out of all of them, 1,000 soldiers serve 10 days every single month and are referred to as the ones who are on duty, while the remaining 2,000 who are considered off duty do not serve at all and instead spend their time taking care of household chores or going out and getting involved in various businesses to bring in some money on the side. That morning, Yungj shows up and is completely caught off guard and shocked when he sees just how low the number of soldiers who actually bothered to show up is, and the old man standing nearby tells him that even without calling all of them in at once, a pretty significant number of them still walked away and made up all kinds of excuses to avoid coming. Yungj stands there genuinely troubled and wondering to himself how this country even manages to keep functioning the way it does with things in this kind of state. Yungj then turns and randomly points to one of the soldiers standing there and tells him to go ahead and draw his sword, and when the soldier actually does it, Yungj is absolutely floored to see that what the guy is carrying is nothing more than a plain kitchen knife. The old general standing nearby completely loses his patience and gets furious at the soldier and decides right then and there that he is going to sit both him and the other officials down and teach them all a very firm and necessary lesson about what is expected of them. The very next day, Yungj and his squad head out and sit down to meet with the brigade commander Kungsan of the Odali tribe. Prince Imyang, the fourth son of King, stands before the soldiers and tells them he never spared himself in training. He says he will show them the most basic foundations, and if they cannot manage even that, they have no place in the cavalry. He tells them to watch closely. Imyang mounts his horse, clears a barrier at full gallop, and fires 3 arrows from his bow without stopping. All 3 hit the target. He turns to the soldiers and tells them they have now seen it so they can repeat it. The soldiers are stunned. He considers that the basics. Imyang says plainly that if they cannot do this, there is nothing to praise them for. The warriors attempt it and struggle badly. Yungj and Imyang watch. The young prince is confident he could do this even as a child. Yungj catches the boast and calls for everyone's attention. He tells the soldiers that they may feel weak right now, but strength once lived in them. They have simply let it go through neglect. He opens his shirt and tells them to look. He says that if they become even half as capable as he is, nobody in the world will be able to stop them. The soldiers take this in and feel encouraged. If the king could build himself up like this, so can they. From the top of a nearby cliff, the bald guy and a companion are watching everything. The companion says the students look like skin and bones next to the prince. The bald guy agrees and says there is nothing more worth seeing. That evening in the bald guy's tent, his men discuss what they witnessed. One of them says that the skill of the man teaching those soldiers exceeds even many of their own fighters. Another notes that the instructor appears to be the king's son, and if he rises into military leadership, it could become a real threat to them. The bald guy agrees that the prince's body was genuinely impressive. One of his men adds that his archery is on the level of the legendary Dream Team. The bald guy then asks if they remember the elite warrior unit once led by Dream Team. Many tribal leaders, including Montium, once stood united under that banner against a common enemy. If Joseon revives that tradition and raises a new generation of Gaebelcho, they could try to impose their power again. Since they were allowed to observe the training firsthand, this is not something to dismiss. A voice from the tent entrance announces a visitor. Bukwin Kashyyyk, the Khan's personal guard, enters and says he has come on his master's orders. He heard that the bald guy had traveled to Joseon. The bald guy says he is flattered that the Khan would send for someone as small as himself. Bukwin tells him not to say that, then gets to the point that they are planning to attack Joseon. The reason is that Joseon has entered into an alliance with the Ming Empire. One of the bald guy's men says that to put up any resistance, Joseon would need at least 10,000 soldiers. Bukwin replies they already have 40,000, which is more than enough. 5,000 would honestly be sufficient. Since the bald guy was recently in Joseon, Bukwin asks him to share what he observed about the state of their weapons, their defenses, and their troops. The bald guy answers carefully. He says Joseon sent 20,000 soldiers to deal with a conflict, but due to internal disorder, not all of them were properly organized for battle. Their men had a difficult time on Joseon's terrain, and there were many falling behind. He adds that his own people served as guides since the king personally invited them. Bukwin asks how Joseon managed to defeat the Amon forces with such a disorganized army. The bald guy says there are rumors that the enemy commander was struck by a severe fever and could not retreat in time. He held on for 4 days through sheer endurance before finally falling. Bukwin then asks the bald guy to provide 5,000 soldiers. The bald guy says he cannot do that right now. Bukwin suggests that if he unites all his tribes, the number should be reachable. The bald guy agrees but says he has a problem with his uncles. Bukwin asks if he means the younger brother of Montama, who recently died, and whether that death has caused unrest among those loyal to him. The bald guy says they have lost all discipline, and he is barely holding back from driving them away immediately. Bukwin assigns the bald guy the role of auxiliary troops and supply management, with no share of the spoils. The bald guy's advisor calls this a serious blow to their pride. The bald guy accepts it but tells Bukwin he hopes the Khan will be equally open with him in return. He then asks directly whether this whole campaign is just a distraction. Bukwin gives him a slight nod of respect and confirms that 40,000 soldiers under Taisher and another 40,000 under the Khan will strike Joseon and Ming simultaneously. Bukwin takes his leave, saying they will be expected. After he goes, the bald guy's advisor says it feels like someone is stepping on their throat again. The bald guy tells him to prepare his horse. He needs to get to Joseon immediately. Standing before the king's throne, the bald guy reports everything. He tells the king that the Khan's personal guard came to him with orders to join the coming attack on Joseon as auxiliary forces. He also reveals that a simultaneous strike on the Ming Empire is planned. King says that since the bald guy already agreed in order to survive, he accepts it. The bald guy appeals to the king's mercy and explains he had no choice but to bow his head before the Khan's messenger at that moment. As Yungj understands it, refusal would have meant a war aimed at total destruction, and Joseon cannot afford that risk. The king turns to the bald guy and says it is clear why he came, as he wants Joseon's protection in the coming conflict. He asks the king to understand that the lives of his people are at stake. The king tells him that his first duty is always to his own people, but he will discuss the details later. For now, the bald guy should rest and continue pretending to prepare for the Khan's orders. The king then meets privately with the crown prince and minister Kim Jong. The minister warns that if the northern tribes are fully drawn into this war, it will be nearly impossible to end it. King asks what they suggest. The minister hints that it may be worth looking for a way to weaken the Ming forces, not a crushing blow, but enough to hurt them significantly. He also raises the possibility that the Jurchen may have found some way to counter Joseon's firearms. Yungj suggests that a surprise attack during rainfall might be an option, though he admits no experienced commander would rely on something so unpredictable. King says that with strong troops, any problem can be managed. He tells Yungj to focus on training the Yonggap soldiers who served in the Pyongan and Hamon provinces, and orders the minister to review the troops being prepared for the campaign before heading to Shanyan. Elsewhere, Taisher addresses a large gathering of horsemen. He tells them that everyone here shares a common resentment against the Ming Empire. He says the Ming Emperor and his people have forgotten what their own ancestors accomplished and now treat others with open contempt. Standing before his army, Taisher draws his blade and announces that their first target will be the gates of Tidin. He will lead that strike himself, while the Khan's forces press in from the east. Together, he says, they will pull the Ming down from the heavens and grind them into the earth. A warrior beside him says he did not expect the tribes to respond with such eagerness. Taisher replies that it was only to be expected given how much the Ming have taken from them. Their enemies will soon face the consequences of their arrogance. A soldier nearby notices a large number of bamboo poles being gathered and wonders what they are for. The guy explains that if they fill bamboo with coal and oil, it becomes enough to burn down a guard post. They are preparing for a siege. At the Ming court, the guy bows before the emperor and reports that preparations for the invasion of North Yuan are nearly complete. The emperor says he will join the campaign personally, meaning all senior and mid-ranking officers are expected on the battlefield as well. He mentions that Joseon has moved to defend Shenyang, a sign they are worried. Another person agrees and adds that if the enemy enters Joseon through Shen, it will be very hard to drive them out again. The emperor picks up his sword and says it may be worth summoning the king of Joseon to his court to ease tensions. Van Hen suggests an idea that not long ago, 2 of Joseon's princes visited Ming. The eldest is clearly the heir, but the second may be suited for war. The emperor points his sword forward and says his will is the will of heaven. He orders the decree written immediately. The imperial decree is sent to Joseon, Prince Yungj of the ruling Joseon dynasty, who is commanded to attend a military gathering so that the emperor may observe him personally. The king cannot believe it. He calls it a flagrant disrespect. Yungj laughs and asks if his father is really worried there is no horse strong enough to carry him. King replies that the issue is the role that Yungj would be going as a messenger, not a military commander. He will not be going into battle. It will be enough to stay quietly in the camp. Yungj promises to make sure he doesn't freeze anywhere and tells his father not to worry. King simply asks him to come back alive. At the main training camp near Namhan Fortress, shouts fill the air. The general is training alongside everyone else. He clears an obstacle course and lands on the ground to the cheering of the warriors around him. Wiping sweat from his face, he says the training setup is impressive, that everything a soldier needs to maintain his form is covered at once. Kim tells Yungj that he will be deployed within a week and placed directly on the front line. Yungj says it is fine as he will stay in the camp and keep out of the way. The general walks over and tells the prince not to be so casual about the battlefield. Then, spinning a club in his hand, he invites Yungj to a friendly duel. Yungj did not expect this at all. The warriors around them begin talking among themselves. They say that despite his age, he is a formidable fighter who has defeated the leaders of hostile tribes, and the prince is in no position to face him on equal terms. Some suggest the guy must have a plan, since crossing the prince could have consequences for him. After that, Yungj and the general square off and get into a sword fight right there, and everyone standing around watching immediately starts thinking that the general is being really generous and kind by deliberately holding back and matching himself to Yungj's level rather than going all out. Eventually, both of their wooden swords end up snapping and breaking apart at the same time, and the 2 of them come to a stop right there. The general then turns to Yungj and tells him straight up that he needs to stay as far away from the battlefield as he possibly can whenever things get serious. Yungj stands there afterward and thinks to himself that the fact that the general was able to read and react to his movements that well, and that naturally says a whole lot, and that the previous Grand Prince Suyang, whose body he is now living in, must have been a truly extraordinary individual even when it came down to martial arts and physical combat. Finally, July 14th rolls around and over at Ming's military base one of the guys comes rushing in and delivers the news to the chief that General Wu has already been killed out there and that Datong has completely fallen and is now in enemy hands. Hearing that hits the chief hard and he is genuinely caught off guard, so he quickly asks about what the enemy situation looks like on the ground right now, and the guy tells him that while their total military forces are being reported at around 40,000, the actual number of soldiers actively fighting on the front lines is only about half of that when you get down to it. Before long the fighting picks right back up and the Ming soldiers find themselves seriously struggling to hold their ground against the cannons being used against them. Despite putting up a fight, the enemy manages to push through and break into the base, and in the chaos, they get their hands on and capture the Ming base leader himself. Not long after that, news makes its way back to the emperor that there are signs showing the enemy temporarily set up and stayed at a location about 20 li ahead of where they currently are. When the emperor finally gets out there and arrives at the spot, he is completely horrified and stunned by what he sees, as people are hanging right there in front of him. How long do you think it will take for Yungj's fitness revolution to transform Joseon's military and public health forever? Comment, training, and let us know your thoughts. Make sure to like and subscribe the channel for more manhwa recaps.